Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Chud Watch. I guess I didn't put that in the title, but that's basically what this is. How's everyone doing? You guys chose the witch outfit for this day on costume month. As you can see, we're on day 27, I believe, so we only have 4 days left. We are over halfway to the next costume month. If you want to get that closer, use the tip link. Other than that, you can support the show through bits, memberships, and subscriptions. How's everyone doing? Hope you're all doing well. Today we're going to be looking at the leaked training material from Project 2525. I've not seen this. I imagine it's going to be equal amounts boring and cringe. So that'll be interesting. We'll take a look at this and should be good. Let's see what I missed in chat. Fennikagami says, sorry everyone, I'm not sticking around for this. I need a nap. I hope that nap goes well. Probably better than this is going to go. Baja with a 50 stream streak, Phoenix Leftist with 165 stream streak says enjoying these streams and community. Thanks for being a part of it. Nerdy with a 10 stream streak says, I must go eat. Literally started watching and I got the dinner shout. If I don't get back before you finish, have fun. Well, thank you. I hope your dinner is yummy. Also, one more housekeeping thing before we get started. After stream today, I'm doing a patron-only stream, so we're probably going to go about 2.5, 3 hours today on the regular stream, and then after that we're going to do a Patreon-only stream where we're going to be looking at some conspiracy theories that I don't normally watch and can't normally watch on regular streams. So if you like my tinfoil content, we're going to be doing sort of a top-secret tinfoil stream on Patreon. So join the Patreon if you want to be a part of that and gain access to all the previous VODs. Cool. Shilling accomplished. Bumble Homestead with a 60 stream streak says those retail training videos, but for fascists, basically. Ash the Poetic Fox, thanks for 41 months, says, hey Hannah, keep doing what you do. You're great, hun. Oh, thank you. Fennikagami says, so can't wait for the right to pretend this is fake news. They're just saying that Kamala's crowds are fake now, which is hilarious. Sure, we'll be covering that more on Tinfoil Tuesday. But anyway, there's a whole playlist of these. We might jump around because there, I guess, are like 14 hours of these or something like that, or like 10 hours. We don't have 10 hours, so we're not going to get through all of them today. We might jump around, but some of these sound more interesting than others. But for now, we'll start right at the top of the playlist, and this is called Working with Congress. Yeah, the left-wing terminology video sounded the funniest to me, but I haven't seen it yet. I have not seen any of this. H-Baird says, Hi. This is turning into a reverse 2016. Where's the bizarro equivalent of the Cubs winning the World Series?
My name's Hugh Fike.
The Detroit Lions winning the Super Bowl?
I'm the current director of government relations at the Conservative Partnership Institute, and I work...
Are any of these guys the ones that got in a fight with a furry? Did y'all hear about that story? Where furry hackers hacked them, and then he yelled at them and said that they were gonna get fucked in prison or something? Michelle Gladio says, Hannah looking like she's about to marry the Tarnished and usher in the Age of Stars. That's an Elden Ring reference for those in chat who didn't get it. Thank you. I've not played Elden Ring, so I didn't get it.
Worked in the office of...
Yeah, for those who didn't hear, there was like a group of furry hackers that hacked Project 2525, which might... Or 2025, not 2525. In the year 2525. Anyway, and they were arguing back and forth with one of the people that worked there, and the person that worked there was like, you're gonna go to prison and you can't have your fursuit in prison. Scotty the Scot, thanks for 25 months and kicking off a hype train. Hugh Fike sounds like a name Bart would have used when phoning Mo.
Management and budget in the executive office of the president, doing legislative affairs.
73% to level 1 on the hype train.
On the House side.
Maybe later, Profane Priestess. I got a lot to go through today.
And I'm joined by my friend and former colleague, James Braid.
Hi, I'm James. I've worked in various senior roles on Capitol Hill. I worked with Hugh in the administration and legislative affairs at the Office of Management and Budget, specifically handling appropriations. Currently, I serve as the
Everyone
legislative
loves
director
Appropriations Committee. That's exciting.
for Senator J.D. Vance.
And we're here to
I'm sorry, what?
Currently, I serve as the legislative director for Senator J.D. Vance.
The legislative director for Senator J.D. Vance, currently Donald Trump's vice presidential pick, is in this Project 2025 training video. I'm shocked.
And we're here to talk about congressional relations with the administration. Essentially, it's going to be a legislative affairs 101.
In the eyes of many in the world, this...
Oh, we're doing Reagan. Okay. All right. I'm already creeped out.
every 4-year ceremony we accept as normal is nothing less than a miracle.
In America, we understand that a nation is only living as long as it is striving.
Only a few generations have been granted the role of defending freedom in its hour of maximum danger.
This great nation will endure.
This is like internal. Why is their internal training stuff so propaganda-y? Like, shouldn't it be straightforward? Like, all right, you know the deal. Let's tell you how to do this. Why are they doing it like it's something that's supposed to air on Fox News?
As it has endured, will revive and will prosper.
Whether we go forward together with courage or turn back to policies that weakened our economy, diminished our leadership in the world, America's future will be in your hands.
Let's kind of get into it.
No, but even that's what's weird to me. If they are true believers, why do they need that? Because stuff like that exists to propagandize. It exists to prime the audience into an emotional state, right? But if these people are the true believers, why do they need that? Because they're already there, right? I don't know. It's just confusing to me.
Just sort of surface kind of the top line understanding of how I think about the Hill from a theoretical perspective.
Revenue.
The Hill is a mechanism for information processing. So we have all these preferences, all these different issues, all these different policies that are happening in the United States, and how do we make them into a coherent legal document that actually can maybe do some good for the people of the United States? Well, we have this huge machinery called Capitol Hill, which is, includes the procedure, right? You might think of that as the software by which the computer runs. You might think of members of Congress as the...
I'm sorry, is he explaining the legislature as if people don't know what the legislature is? Minute left on the hype train.
Individual decision-making nodes.
Hey, Cosmic Cats.
What we do in the executive branch and legislative affairs is serve as the surface area between the decision makers in the executive branch and the decision makers in Congress in hopes of pushing information and persuasive policies out there so that we can influence the operation of that machine. And that's what we're going to talk about today, some of the basic strategies that we need to pursue in order to ensure that the president's agenda is considered as favorably as humanly possible on Capitol Hill.
Yeah, I think about it if you get into...
So basically, your job is to lobby Congress on behalf of a hypothetical Trump 2024 administration. 30 seconds on the hype train. HBeard with 40 bits says, this is part of the reason evangelicals had such a freak out during COVID. Their entire method is emotional control, so constantly reinforcing the emotional roller coaster they do every week is important to keeping people coming back. A lot of deconversion stories start with someone not going to church for a month and realizing how manipulated they were. Well, I hadn't considered that, I guess.
Legislative affairs job that you basically have 3 marching orders. 1, you got to have staff relationships. 2, you got to have good principal relationships. And 3, you ultimately need to know what the issues that the members care about.
The role of the executive branch legislative affairs is to it's just a bullet points of what they already went over. I don't need to say this.
Beachhead team. So speaking specifically
Overthought, thanks for gifting a sub.
to staff relationships, if you're on the beachhead team, you know, I didn't serve on the beachhead team, but everybody that did say if you're changing administrations, if you're basically switching from a conservative to a liberal administration, you're not going to be left with the tools, or you're not going to have the lists of things that you're going to absolutely need. So one of your first priorities is to obviously work with the administration to figure out what the priorities of the agency or the part of the administration you're in, but then start developing lists of members that include staff members for the equities or the things that are necessarily going to be important to your day-to-day job. And so what you want to do is immediately start creating lists of the committees on Capitol Hill, both on the House and the Senate, that are going to be important for direct legislative jurisdiction over your agency's areas. Then you need to start doing individual meetings with them, putting a face to a name. That's really important. And then you need to make sure you have the right contact information. These are sometimes very quick moving decisions, and they are quick moving in that you need to be able to directly communicate with those people, not just via email, but be able to pick up the phone and call people, because things move very quickly.
Listening to people talk so dryly about this much lobbying just grosses me out. We need to get in the ears of these politicians and manipulate them into doing exactly what we want. And
in the administration, I found that you don't always have the most amount of time to be able to prep or give members or their staff heads up, but you need to do that right after the thing is announced. So that's staff relationships. Talk to me a little bit about what it means to have good principal member relationships, and that you are directly engaging with the members that are either on the committee or important to your principal.
One of the things I would say that is a little bit of a surprise, I think, to people who encounter Congress for the first time, is that each individual Hill office is a small business unto itself. They have different cultures, they have different relationships between staff, and they have different decision-making structures. And those structures are entirely idiosyncratic. You can probably take a guess that the chief of staff is going to be an important decision maker, but often,
Phyllis Filler, thanks for gifting a sub.
A legislative assistant might be the key decision-making person in the area that you're looking to work on, right? And so I think to your point about we come in and we don't have the infrastructure built, and we're not going to get the infrastructure, and we have to build the infrastructure on the fly, I think the absolute core aspect of that infrastructure is segmentation. You've got to come in and understand relationships that are important and vital to form immediately. And those categories of people are going to be the authorizing committee for your agency, the appropriating subcommittee for your agency, and then the full committee on appropriations, as well as any other authorizing committees, because often jurisdiction.
I'm going to skip forward because this one seems mostly administrative stuff in terms of, like, make sure you know your points of contact, make sure you know who the decision makers are within specific subcommittees so you can most effectively lobby towards that person and their interests as opposed to talking to people lower in the totem pole. So we might end up skipping through this one and get to the, like, liberal stuff. What is the video? It is like code words of the left or something like that, which I know we need to get to.
Really important to come in with
almost assure that your boss at some point is going to get brought before the committee. So you want to be able to delineate what members your boss need to meet with ahead of those committee hearings or ahead of those questions.
Drier than Shapiro's wife. Okay. Let's go to the one I know we all want to watch. I just got to find it in this list. Policymaking, management appointees, appointment survival guide, conservative moment history. Oh god, that one sounds interesting. Federal budget, presidential transitions, federal workforce, art of professionalism, administrative state, passing new regulations, oversight and investigations, working with the media, that one will be interesting, staffing in office, federal regulatory process, executive orders, this one, background check, security clearances, conserving America, navigating policy making, left-wing code words and language. There it is. This is the one I wanted to watch. I'm very curious how they're going to interpret jargon used by the left into whatever bullshit they want.
Hi, I'm Katie Sullivan.
Hi,
I'm
Katie.
just a normal American woman.
The fact that you are working with Project 2025 determined that was a lie.
But to the left, that makes me a cisgendered ethno-imperialist birthing
What?
person with pronouns she, her. Words like that are quite a mouthful, and it's one
Oh no, this one is gonna be bad!
American
Ethno-imperialist.
needs to spit out before we choke on it.
In the eyes of many in the world,
Oh,
This
it's
every-
the same intro, we get it. Monsters in the attic! Alright, let's go. Warning, I'm assuming there's gonna be transphobia in here. There's gonna be some fucking pronouns.
Bethany, are your children afraid of monsters in the attic or under the bed?
Yeah, they have been, but we always tell them that they do not exist.
Today we have news. There are monsters in Uncle Sam's attic.
It's the words, phrases, definitions that are used, which may look like one thing, but absolutely mean another. And it is scary.
During
What?
this training, we will identify the problem, discuss examples from our time in the federal government, as well as the 5 cross-cutting principles of the current administration.
Gitara with 50 bits says, I'm just a normal American woman. Ma'am, your monotone voice and 1,000-yard stare into something slightly off-screen makes me question if you're a robot or not.
We will teach you how to unwind the words and phrases that have been so artfully layered into every document in the federal government. You can do this in any role at any level of seniority. This training will
Oh my god, she's reading a cue card!
prepare you to make changes and fast.
This is the best people they could get for this? Overthought says they have both kinds of woman right-wing voters, blonde and one without blondes with and without glasses. No, they like redheads now too. I don't know if you've seen, but this is pretty cringe. I forget if it's on Rumble or BitChute. But their categories are done as like a waifu redhead lady. Anime and animation, arts and literature, auto vehicles. So right-wing people are obsessed with redheads now, too. Just so you know.
The left continually pivots and assaults definitions and phrases. They twist words and phrases to support subconscious acceptance of a philosophy that was rejected or is against the grain of human existence.
Against the grain of human existence. We're coming in hot on this. Ma'am, what the fuck are you talking about?
Like, what is a woman? Perhaps the most effective tool the left wields is their ability to engage in constant subliminal advertising.
Subliminal advertising is literally not a thing. They've done experiments on this. It doesn't work. They're literally pushing conspiracy theories. This is just the same crap I see on Tinfoil Tuesday, but dressed up in a suit and tie. This is the same crap. That's not subliminal.
Through their
People disagree with us. Is it because we're creepy and our opinions are bad? No, the left must be using subliminal messaging. Obligatory Oblivion NPC video. Oh god. Do we need to play the music? Do we need to play the Oblivion music while we watch it?
Blades, dark times
Am I brainwashing you? Yes, but only in a nice way.
are upon us. The Emperor and his sons were slain on our watch. The Empire is in chaos. But there is yet hope. Here is Martin Septim, true son of Uriel Septim.
Oh, he's unconscious.
Hail, Dragonborn! Hail, Martin Septim! Hail! Hail!
Your Highness, the blades are at your command. You will be safe here until you can take up your throne.
Joffrey, all of you, I know you all expect me to be Emperor. I'll do my best. I'm not used to giving speeches, but I wanted you to know that I appreciate your welcome here. I hope I prove my...
Okay. He mantled Talos after this. He's fine.
Narrative, words, and phrases. Marxism became socialism.
Oh no! Oh no! They think Marxism and socialism are the same thing. That's not good. That's just incorrect.
And democratic socialism, and is now represented by the terms social justice and equity.
What? No, these are intersecting, but not the same concept. What are you talking about? Equity can be a part of some of these things, but that doesn't make these the same thing. Oh no.
This is perhaps the most scary of...
Sorry, he mantled Akatosh, you're right. Talos ascended. I'm sorry.
All.
Katie, what brings to mind is the quote, "He who controls the language rules the world." It's attributed to Joseph Stalin and other tyrants. And George Orwell stated, "He who controls language controls culture."
Orwell was a socialist.
Even more, Hitler and others lived by the creed. If you repeat a lie often enough, people will believe it. Without doubt, it's true. Language is
like Trump does constantly.
A powerful and often controlling tool.
Career bureaucrats.
Oh, I know why, Lennon Cat. I've seen Jeremy's videos.
The left are also using language to change culture and gain more and more authority.
It's interesting that they're assuming a top-down, like they're assuming there's people going, we need to change these words so people's views change, not understanding it's the opposite. These things, certain ideas come from certain places and they spread because cultural ideals and people's beliefs change over time, and that necessitates a change in the way we speak about certain topics. It changes the definitions of words. It changes how we think about the people around us. That's just part of being a human being. That's not like a conspiracy. That's just how language works.
By upsetting the balance of power envisioned by our founding fathers. This, in essence, weaponized language against the American people.
Chitara says, okay, absolutely not. These people keep doing this thing where they go, Hitler is a bad guy, but then are totally cool with Hitler-esque policies, such as those laid out in Project 2025. Of course they don't like Hitler. He lost!
This training is vital to you as a political appointee.
I would imagine they think to themselves, if he just won, I wouldn't have to be doing this right now.
If there's one thing you take from this training, it is to know when you start your job as a political appointee, every single word, phrase, and acronym must be vetted, and you must determine what implications every word has before publishing or moving forward with any official or internal document.
All right.
Wow, that seems like a huge waste of time. I'm kind of glad they're wasting time. That's good. Are they going to be ineffective because they're genuinely cuckoo banana pants and believe their own conspiracy theories? Like, they're kind of sniffing their own farts on this one. I kind of thought they'd be more like, we're going to get those rubes, but it's like, no, the rubes are coming from inside the project. H-Bird says, the balance of power envisioned by the founders was that all voting would be done by white landowning men. Do these ladies not understand this? I'd imagine they obfuscated in their head, if that makes sense.
So now that we have identified the problem, let's give the viewers a taste of what we saw in the Trump administration. Bethany and I were both part of a coordinated effort in the Trump administration focused on trying to take...
Trump has never heard of Project 2025, by the way. He doesn't know anyone from it. Don't worry about it.
Back hijacked language and definitions across the United States.
She sounds buzzed. She's just trying to read, and that's hard for Republicans.
States government.
They don't do it recreationally, so they find it difficult when it's required of them. Beyond shameless, thanks for following.
And even at our engagements in the United Nations. From our
Where Trump got laughed at.
experiences, we will teach you how to identify the left's progressive language, scrutinize career staff compositions for dangerous language, and how to combat their manipulative
Wait a minute, I thought you guys were all for free speech. Now we're policing language?
Ensuring clarity of definition and conservative intention. Bethany and I are going to give you some examples of what we mean by this need to always ensure clarity. But in no way are we able to foresee the future and anticipate how the progressive left will continue to co-opt even more words and definitions.
The world keeps changing and I can't keep up and I'm scared.
We can tell you the words and phrases being used today, but by the time you enter the administration, these examples may be obsolete. This will help you spot crucial issue areas to pay close attention to. We do not know what they will be calling men and women by the time you begin your tenure with the administration. The left is trying to dismantle America and rebuild it in their own image by using the art of deception, and words and definitions are their weapon of choice. Remember, words change culture. Bethany, with your extensive experience with both domestic and international policy issues, and in light of your role in leadership positions at USAID, can you walk us through some examples of how the left uses words, weaponizes really, words and definitions? And if you could do
Aren't
that.
these the people that used to be like, words can never hurt you? Grow a spine, you coward. Like,
Not in a context of the cross-cutting.
Snake Man with a 2-pound super chat says, this is some pot calling the kettle black BS. Oh yeah, this is weirdly projecting.
Issues that are identified in the mandate for leadership. And really, as we understand, the cross-cutting issues were identified because they are the pillars of the Biden administration. And so they've been layered into virtually every document in the federal government. If you could walk us through some of those examples, I think it would be incredibly helpful.
I'd be happy to, absolutely. The 5 topic areas for today's discussion are centered on women, children, and family, environment, human rights and border security.
Oh boy, that'll be a fun one.
The gender cult.
Oh, that'll be a funner one.
The first topic, women, children, and family. I worked on international issues and very closely followed the language presented at the United Nations. And I saw up close and personal how this indeed is true. Language is used to control culture. I'll never forget a conversation I had with the Chief of Staff at USAID. We are trying to provide alternative language for the highly controversial phrase Comprehensive Sexuality Education, or CSE, which at the United Nations had come to mean not just typical sex education, but instead had been morphed.
Can you define typical sex education?
Into teaching and normalizing sex at very early ages.
I don't think that's true. I think you're just upset that children are being taught safety and consent. But like, whatever, cool beans.
Even as young as preschool. And for girls who...
Yeah, the reason that they teach kids, like, at preschool level, the sex ed is, no one touches your bathing suit area, or whatever. Like, no one should touch you if you don't want them to. It's to protect kids from getting molested. It's to give kids the tools and words to understand if something bad is happening to them. They can A, try and say no, B, go to an adult if anything does happen to them. At that young, they are not teaching kids anything inappropriate. They are trying to protect them from being molested, you sick bitch. H. Baird says, I've come to the conclusion that taking in information and updating your mental mode of the world is a skill with a distribution across the population. I think in extreme cases, there's actual learning disability where people can't update their opinions based on new information, e.g. people who cite 6th grade biology to argue against trans people. Since they can't understand that most people just have an ability they lack, they assume it's something nefarious. Maybe? Oh.
Who became pregnant, that abortion was a preferable method of birth control.
What are you talking about? The preferable form of birth control would be condoms? Or some other kind of contraception? But yes, if a literal child gets pregnant, yeah, they shouldn't have the fucking kid. What?
Back to the conversation with the Chief of Staff. He suggested several alternatives, but each time I told him that, unfortunately, his recommended edit was also interpreted as CSE. Frustrated, he vented. They have literally co-opted the English language. And it was at that moment that I realized that the progressive left is controlling the language, redefining definitions, and by doing so...
We didn't like the definition of this thing, so we've decided our political opponents have co-opted it intentionally. It's not that we're out of touch. It's a nefarious cabal of deep staters changing the English language. These people are fucking cooked in the head.
Are ruling the world. On a positive note, despite all the angst that we did succeed on that negotiation. DevEx published an article with the headline, "No Mention of Reproductive Rights in Declarations Out of G7 Development Ministerial." You can read more about this in the course materials section. Now, let's talk about the word abortion. The left got very creative years ago and started using different words to make abortion sound a little less like murder.
It's not murder! This wasn't even considered an issue until segregation ended and the right decided to create a coalition of Christians to all of a sudden take on a traditionally Catholic opinion, which is anti-abortion. Did you guys know that Protestants weren't anti-abortion in this weird way until after they lost the culture war on segregation? And then they were like, oh, what do we do now? What do we do now? And they stuck it on abortion. I'm so tired.
For example, sexual and reproductive health, reproductive rights, sexual and reproductive health services, reproductive health services, sexual and reproductive health and reproductive rights, sexual and reproductive health and rights. All of these include abortion.
Yes, abortion is a part of reproductive health, correct? It's a healthcare thing. Yes, you are correct.
For years, we knew that the terms above that I just mentioned had been used and that they were code for abortion.
It's not a code. Abortion is just inclusive in those things.
Left and
the entire thing isn't abortion, but abortion is subordinate within those definitions, inclusive as a part of it.
Career bureaucrats at state and USAID told us, oh, no, no, no. But then when I was negotiating with Canada for the G7 Development Ministerial, I said, well...
The fact that this lady negotiated with anyone on on behalf of the United States is horrifying.
Can we just use these terms and add that does not include abortion? And their response was telling. They said, but it does include abortion.
Yeah, abortion is a part of healthcare, correct. You're the one that was trying to change the definition. Yes, correct?
Even with that admission, I had a difficult time convincing political appointees that these terms were co-opted. Another example...
It's not co-opted, it's just that you don't like that those definitions are inclusive of the thing that you are against for political reasons. What?
Hits closer to home and highlights how imperative it is for political appointees to ensure definitions are correct and explicitly followed. 3 days after President Trump took office on January 20th, 2017, he issued a presidential memorandum regarding the Mexico City policy. This became known as the Protecting Life and Global Health Assistance Policy, or the expanded Mexico City policy.
Mr. Duck Sauce with 10 months with Prime says, hello, I just finished a 30-mile bike ride. Perfect timing. Woo! Maybe sit down. That's a long bike ride. Hydrate. I could do that.
When I arrived at USAID in June 2017, I was the first political appointee in a bureau outside the front office and the 6th political appointee in the building. Despite President...
By the way, everyone, this lady's gonna vote. Are you gonna vote? Because they're both gonna vote. Are you gonna vote? Vote! If you don't vote, fuck you. If you can't vote because you're not in the country, you know, not a citizen, of course. But if you can vote and you don't, fuck you.
Trump issuing a presidential memorandum at the very onset of his administration to immediately change course and to protect life. Even months later, his guidance was ignored. I remember hearing careers refer to this policy and even seeing documents that referred to it as the global gag order. I immediately told the career staff that we do not refer to it as the global gag order, but instead appropriately as the protecting life and global health assistance policy.
Why won't they go along with our bullshit definitions that make it seem less like we're culpable for keeping people from talking about the healthcare choices we don't agree with? You're the one trying to make things sound innocuous, and then you're upset people call a spade a spade.
Policy. To some, it may seem inconsequential, but it actually was completely undermining the president and the American people who had elected President Trump. So,
most people didn't vote for Trump.
So opposed to this policy change, the left actually started a new organization and an international movement called She Decides, which invited NGOs and other foreign governments to join and actively promote abortion services and advocacy.
Good.
Essentially joining together to try to counter what the Trump administration was doing to protect life.
Go fuck yourself. Sorry. I'm not going to be very professional in this video because these people just piss me off and they also creep me out. So I'm probably just going to be like, fuck you a lot in this. So I hope that's more cathartic for you than it is annoying.
Language matters.
Bethany, it's incredible how the left...
It's incredible how the left subverts...
left is able to make killing children and babies a pro-movement. I mean, their narrative is just incredible and so opposite of what the reality of the situation is.
I don't think I'm going to take lessons on reality from these people who are in the Republican Party and actively make it a political position to deny reality at every front. Not babies.
We see that also with environment, right? So I remember when I was in school, in elementary school, we were taught that we were all going to be frozen over by an ice age. And of course, this was terrifying.
What is she talking about?
And then in the 80s, it was acid rain. We were all going to die from the acid rain.
Yeah, we banned the stuff that made acid rain a big problem. She's also going to bring up the ozone layer, which we also solved by banning the chemicals that were burning a hole in the ozone layer. That's what happens when you actually legislate a problem away.
And then it moved to global warming, which I think, you know...
Oh, she skipped the ozone layer.
Most of the people watching this...
By the way, global warming or climate change has been a thing we've known about for 100 years. You can literally go see the papers and stuff from 100 years ago saying, hey, this is going to be a problem. I don't know what you were taught in the 70s or whenever you went to school. Not necessarily the point. We've known about it for a long time. Robo Twilight with a 5-stream streak says, hello, Hannah. Hello, chat. You're telling me there's training videos for this garbage? Indeed.
Remember, that was during the Obama administration.
Yes.
And then science comes along and disproves the global warming theory in large part, and we have...
What?
Science comes along and disproves the global warming theory in large part. And
what? What science could she possibly be trying to gesture towards to justify that statement?
And we have one of the most frigid winters ever known.
It's cold right now, guys. So there's no global warming. I'm not hungry, so no one ever starves. H-Baird says, people like this have it in their minds that the word abortion only refers to loose women using it as a form of birth control. This also acts like a moral trump card for them. They literally feel like because they are anti-abortion, then they're automatically more moral than pro-choice people and don't have to ever think about their own positions. Telling them that they're wrong about this wrecks their whole sense of self, which is why they get so angry about this. I mean, I think they've also been brainwashed to genuinely believe that from the moment of conception, a fetus is a person. They're wrong, but I think they genuinely believe that too. I think it's an incorrect belief, but I do believe it's a belief they hold quite strongly.
And then the next thing you know, they're calling it climate change. Now, I always understood that climate change meant seasons.
No, you dumb asshole! What? Yeah! Is this intentional obtuseness, or are they really this dumb?
Climate does change all the time.
I'm just yelling today. It's just so... The fact that we have to deal with these fucking idiots as if they're serious people disgusts me. I want to vomit on these people's faces so they can feel a minuscule amount of the pain they give me.
But of course, that's not what's meant by the left. What do you think about all of about the left's words and definitions in the environment?
It's a great point, Katie. They don't stop. Climate change, allegedly, is everywhere. And if the American people...
Phyllis Filler says, these people aren't random citizens making comments about politics. They are in politics and were in or near positions of power. I don't think you need to pull punches or be professional in your coverage with these people. Don't give them the respect they refuse to give you. That's fair.
Elect a conservative president, his administration will have to eradicate climate change references from absolutely everywhere. And according to our intelligence community, the #1 threat facing our country today is, drumroll, climate change.
Oh man, it's almost like you should maybe listen. Maybe you should listen to those intelligence agencies whose entire job is, like, seeking out and understanding threats. Like, you seriously think that intelligence agencies, which are largely staffed by right-wing people because they pull people out of law enforcement, you believe that these agencies are politically motivated for the left? At no point in American history have intelligence agencies been on the side of the left. Zero. It has happened 0 times. So no, you're wrong. It's an existential threat to the planet, which we live on, by the way.
Not Russia, not China, not AI, climate change.
Yes, climate change is going to cause huge issues all around the world, which is going to lead to conflict and crises as people flee their nations that are no longer livable and go all over the world. It's going to lead to resource shortages. It's going to lead to water shortages, which is a resource, but I think I need to point it out separately because it's pretty important. It's going to lead to crisis after crisis, and the more we try and mitigate this, the better, but instead, these people want to sit there with their fingers in their ears and go, if I pretend a problem isn't real, it's not real. This is the same people that would say, oh, we should just stop testing for COVID so our numbers aren't so high. They think out of sight, out of mind is real. They don't have object permanence. They have the brains of pudding.
This shows how the federal government is all in on this issue. And climate change activists wield a lot of power. This is an issue to pay attention to as it has infiltrated every part of the federal government. Now, when I think of climate change, I immediately think of population control, don't you?
I don't know about you, but I'm a fucking idiot. How about you? No, I don't. I don't, because I don't spend my time watching conspiracy theories on Rumble and believing them.
I think about the people who don't want you to have children because of the impact on the environment.
Bitch, have kids. I don't give a shit. They'll hate you just like I do. Have as many fucking kids as you want. No one's stopping you from having children.
Perhaps not everyone will make that connection, but after spending time in the international space trying to protect life, I can tell you that this is part of their ultimate goal, to control people. Let me share a personal example of how the left seeks to permeate every dimension of life through their skewed terminology and
Tara with 50 bits says, we've only had worsening storms, colder winters, hotter summers, melting ice caps, warming oceans, and naturally occurring features of the Earth are deteriorating. For fuck's sake, we don't need scientists to show us that the climate is changing around us at this point. Just look outside.
Definition. When I arrived at USAID, I had a career employee ask me how many children I had. I thought it was a bit odd of a question, but to be kind,
Is that,
I answered.
Is that an odd question if you work with someone, asking about their life? I don't know if that's odd. What, this person I work with wants to talk to me like a human being? What's their fucking problem?
I had 3 children. And he actually said to me, "Oh, wow, 1.5 too many for the environment." I smiled and I said very politely, if I could have 10 more children, I would. The policy book captures the essence of climate change. And I quote,
Yeah, I don't think that happened either. I think that's just a story she made up.
"In the name of combating climate change, policies
Because no one talks like that.
have been used to create an artificial energy scarcity that will require trillions of dollars in new investment, supported with taxpayer subsidies to address a..."
Bernard L. McNamee. Bernard McNamee. Government official who served as a commissioner for the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission from 2018 to 2020. So he's a Trump appointee. Let's see, McNamee was a member of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission before joining FERC. McNamee served as the U.S. Department of Energy as Executive Director of the Office of Policy and Deputy General Counsel for Energy Policy. His career in public service includes key leadership positions under Attorney Generals in Virginia and Texas, and policy advisor roles for U.S. Senator Ted Cruz, oh boy, Attorney General Ken Paxton, and Governor of Virginia. McNamee is a partner at McGuire Woods LLP and a senior advisor at McGuire Woods Consulting LLC. McNamee has been a member of the Federalist Society since 1990. He's doing just great then. So another right-wing asshole.
Problem.
Lennon Cat says that story didn't happen so much that it created a nexus of unreality and made several nearby true things fictional.
That government and special interests themselves have created. Page 364, end of quote. Population growth, environmental changes, and weather patterns have all been intertwined by the left. They take or even make up a...
You're the one that's what are you talking about? You're the one that's saying this is about population control. They keep doing a thing and then blaming the left for a thing they did. This is just that Eric Andre meme where he shoots the guy and he goes, "Why would the left do this?" Like, what in the world?
And create, extend, and alter the definition to validate whatever ideology or position they want to ingrain and convince others is good, when in reality it's not. Often, as you just heard, they are simply not coherent or logical. Remember, our intelligence community identified climate change as the #1 threat to America.
Gee, I wonder why. Should you maybe read why they said that? Or are you just gonna, like, say no without looking at it at all? Cool. Overthought with 100 bits says, yes, creating infrastructure isn't free, doesn't mean it shouldn't be done. Avoiding doing anything will result in damages worse than the cost of investment. They want to do literally penny pinching for an entire country, you know, an action that is usually a sign of a failing business.
So even if you do not work at the Department of Energy, no matter where you work, because of the Biden administration's executive orders and policy priorities, you will have to look for climate change language and get rid of it.
Bethany, when you were talking about how the left has co-opted so many words and weaponized so many words when it comes to abortion, and that's something that, you know, political appointees in the next administration
are those on that desk? Am I crazy? Are those like ram horn things? What the fuck are those tubes on the desk other than a thing to go through? And that's like a Christian dominionist thing, if that's what they are, just for the record.
Are going to have to really look
No,
at...
they don't look like paper to me.
This idea that it's a right...
No, because it's not a shofar. You're right, it is. They're supposed to be the Constitution. I think they're supposed to be the Constitution rolled up. From the other angle, they look a little bit like straight shofars.
Any phrases that included rights. Is there other places where rights are used as a catch-all and it means something else?
Katie, that's a great question. And
that's a great question that wasn't written in a script for us to read together. Thank you for begging that question for me.
In fact,
now let's talk about how we shouldn't give people human rights.
Number 3 is human rights. Human rights in border security. So rights, rights, rights. The left is always coming up with new rights.
Rights, rights, rights. These people always complaining about their human rights. Oh. Please vote. I am begging you on my hands and knees to vote. I will literally get on my hands and knees and beg you to vote. Fucking vote.
In the Trump administration, we countered human rights with unalienable rights. The careers went absolutely crazy.
Those things aren't mutually exclusive? They're acting like that's a mic drop. What?
At USAID. But thankfully, President Trump had established a commission on unalienable rights at the State Department, and we would just point back to the commission. Sadly, our founding documents were not sufficient, but thankfully the commission was. The Department of State's Commission on Unalienable Rights was charged with providing the U.S. government with advice on human rights grounded in our nation's founding principles.
AKA, how could we get away with doing the shittiest things possible using some sort of pseudo-originalist bullshit?
The principles of the 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Now, I'm going to turn over border security to you, Katie, as it deals with legalese.
And we all know that border security is a major issue, and the differences between a conservative presidency and administration and the current administration couldn't be more stark than in this area. So getting the words very precise and correct is crucial. The left has co-opted language and definitions as it relates to immigration.
Haven't co-opted. Not how that works.
Illegal immigration is one of the most devastating challenges America faces today, particularly when you factor in all of the secondary costs and effects of illegal immigration.
Immigration is a net positive to the economy of the United States. They come into the country and do labor, which frankly, I think they deserve better rights because they get mistreated by corporations. If the right actually gave a shit about stopping people from coming into the country undocumented, then they would crack down on businesses who hire people undocumented and give them huge fines. But they don't want to do that because they know that they're fundamental to the functioning of tons of businesses, especially in the agriculture industry, all across the American South and the rest of the country to a lesser degree. Like, it's just lies? It's rhetorical bullshit they're using in order to court votes while not actually doing anything about it.
Including illicit drug and human trafficking. The left knows the American...
A fun fact, drug trafficking is already illegal. Deal with that as it comes. Stop roping in innocent people into this shit.
People oppose illegal immigration and understands its effects. So they have spent years using language designed to both conflate illegal immigration and legal immigration, the latter of which most Americans support, and soften the idea that illegal immigration is, in fact, illegal.
Pretty sure it's a civil crime. Am I wrong? I don't even think it's criminal. They act like crossing the border illegally is a death sentence crime, when in reality I think it's a civil crime. I don't even think it's criminal. I could be wrong.
It is a good bet that the left has focused group tested the language it uses to cover
most undocumented migrants cross the border legally and then overstay on their visas or whatever.
The horrors of illegal immigration. For example, when describing illegal immigration, the left likes to use words and phrases like undocumented immigrants and migrants. These terms are designed to sound softer and take the edge off the fact that these people are illegally in the United States.
I don't give a shit. I don't give even a little bit of a shit. Do you know how expensive it is to apply for U.S. citizenship? You're basically saying that the only people who should ever be allowed to come into the United States are people with thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars sitting by. And I just don't think that's cool. So I don't give a shit. That's my answer. Everyone's gonna have different answers. That's mine. I don't give a shit. I think borders are a weird, stupid thing anyway.
To note that they specifically avoid using the word alien, which is the terminology used in federal law.
Yeah, that's pretty othering.
To be clear,
treats them not like human beings, so that's not super cool.
Alien is not a negative or pejorative term. It is a legal term of art.
Okay, but you're using it pejoratively, thus making it pejorative. You're doing the thing. The way that words are used changes how people feel about them and add to the connotations. The fact that the right has used alien as a very pejorative term pointedly at undocumented immigrants has made that word have certain connotations, which is why it's avoided generally. You're participating in this system in which definitions change organically, but you think it's an evil plan by the left. Nope, words just change. That's life.
It simply means that an individual is not a citizen of a particular country. Language matters here for a lot of reasons, but primarily because citizens of the United States have rights.
The implication of that sentence is that people not from the United States should not be treated as though they have rights. Not a fan of that.
That others, including foreign nationals who are illegally on our soil, do not. If I had to guess,
Jesus Christ, I don't even think that's true. I'm pretty sure the Supreme Court has said the opposite of that. Like, I don't even think this is just my opinion. I'm pretty sure the Supreme Court has dictated that, like, no, whether you're a citizen or not, you need to be treated as though you have human rights here in the United States. So, that's interesting.
I would say that
it's one of the reasons we keep a gulag in Cuba, because it's not on United States soil, technically.
The left's attempt to wash away the term alien stems from their disdain of actual law.
You just don't want everyone to have human rights. What happened to these rights being unalienable? Became pretty alienable when you decided you didn't like the person they were being applied to, huh? These rights are unalienable, except when someone I don't like has them, and then they don't get them. Jesus Christ.
Since they want to avoid discussion of what federal immigration law...
When she reads unalienable, she thinks it means aliens can't have them.
...actually requires, which is everything they refuse to do, and their interest in washing away the overall value of citizenship. Remember, citizenship places a focus on nationality and sovereignty. The left has bought...
Oh boy, sovereignty, huh? Is this gonna turn into Sovereign Citizen Sunday?
...into the globalist vision of a borderless world, and their language choices reflect that. The left loves to say that illegal aliens are undocumented.
Mm-hmm.
Not only is that terminology not used anywhere in federal law.
I don't give a shit. The law uses all sorts of specific jargon. I'm not talking to you in a legal document. People are talking colloquially.
But it is
a weak-ass cope.
Clearly designed to soften the concept of illegality.
Why are they making it harder for us to try and demonize people from other countries?
By making it seem like it's just a technicality. In other words...
Yeah, pretty much.
If you are undocumented, it makes it sound like you can be here legally, but you're missing a few pieces of bureaucratic paperwork.
Yeah, that's pretty much exactly how I feel about it. Tara says, I'm so sick of this narrative that immigrants are coming over and running over our legal system and stealing all our stuff and destroying our country. I'm a healthcare worker and I actually deal with a ton of pediatric patients. Some of the sweetest families I meet are, quote, illegal parents of so-called, quote, anchor babies. They're considerate and hardworking people who just want to be okay, but citizens end up being most entitled, rude, and downright inconsiderate people I've ever worked with. Yep.
That is simply not the case. If an alien has not gone through the appropriate process for obtaining a visa to enter the United States or other...
Again, most people who are undocumented immigrants are people who did get visas, came over, and just stayed. The vast majority of undocumented immigration is not people crossing the border without legality. It's that they come over legally and then stay longer than they were originally intended to. Guess she doesn't know that.
Otherwise followed United States law to enter the United States. They are illegally here. Period. Hard stop. Calling illegal aliens undocumented immigrants is the intellectual equivalent of calling someone who breaks into your house in the middle of the night an undocumented homeowner.
I don't think it is. Because one of those things is a danger to people, and the other isn't. So there you go.
It is inaccurate, and it is...
She's a lawyer, I believe, yeah.
...is designed...
Or at least she works with the law.
...to be inaccurate. The term migrants, or...
I understand they see both as dangers. They're wrong.
...or migration are just as deceptive. The left likes to use migrants and migration, not only because it sounds gentle, but it also creates confusion.
An accurate description of what they're doing. That's what that is.
When people hear these terms, they know deep down that migration is seasonal and circular.
What? Oh my god, they just genuinely don't know that that's an accurate term for things and they only think of birds. Oh my god, when they hear migration, they just think of birds because they're fucking idiots. Oh my god. They hear migration and their brain goes, like birds? They're so dumb. They're making policy positions based on their own idiocy. Oh my god.
They think of birds or butterflies. They fly.
What? What are you talking about? Oh my god, they're so dumb.
South, they fly north, and so on. And historically, we have had foreign nationals come into the United States for seasonal or agricultural work and then return to their home countries. It would be reasonable and accurate to refer to those individuals as migrant workers because they ultimately return home. But make no mistake, the current mass illegal immigration we are seeing as a result of the Biden administration's intentional actions is not migration, and these people are not migrants. It is an orchestrated invasion being led by the Biden administration.
No, it's not. That's not what that word means. You're calling people crossing the border undocumented an invasion. Now who's using words in an untruthful way? Jesus Christ.
In conjunction with the Mexican cartels. The bottom line is, we win or lose
famously, the Mexican cartels love the American federal government.
Fights based on language. If you let the other side of the debate set the terms of the debate, you've already lost. In the context of immigration specifically, we have to start using more accurate language to describe what is going on and pegging our language to existing law.
Get consent from your language before pegging it. Hydrate.
If we can take back the language, here and elsewhere, we will win more of these fights. So Bethany, I mean, these are some great examples. And another one that comes to my mind that has been completely co-opted by the left is gender.
Oh no. Oh, this one's gonna hurt. This one's gonna hurt close to home. All right. Let's hurt ourselves.
And I know you have so much experience in the history of your professional life in dealing with this. Where are we today on this issue and the language and the words and the definitions?
Let's talk about the word gender. The word gender is no longer a polite way to refer to biological sex, male
Correct.
or female. The word now is completely toxic.
It's not toxic, it's just been used differently in a sociological context, and that specific meaning of the word has expanded to the general public's usage, which is good because it's helpful. Herodona says an alternative title to this video could be How to Make Word Soup the Heritage Foundation Way.
It's no longer being used to mean male or female, but now how people identify, which is where we get this idea of gender identity. Katie, did you know that there are between 72 and 1,000 different kinds of gender? We should never use the word gender as conservatives.
Just blocking yourself off from a whole ass word. Ah! I think that means we won, fam. That means we won. They can't use this word anymore. We win. It's ours. Woo!
It's not.
They're not TERFs. I promise you these women are not feminists in any potential definition of the word. They're just transphobic.
Specific, and it's nonsensical. Instead, use the word sex or biological sex or male and female. And I don't care where you are in the administration, you will deal with the word gender. Speaking of,
man, it's almost like it's a part of everyday life and you just don't like to think about it.
Of sex, the next phrase that we're going to talk about is sex assigned at birth. Now, I just told you to use the word sex, and you may think that sex assigned at birth, that sounds great. Well,
your sex isn't assigned at birth. Your gender's assigned at birth. Your sex is just your sex.
Actually, it's not. It's the left's attempt to change biological fact and to try to normalize their belief that...
She's so hardcore on the gender thing, she's misspeaking intentionally to avoid saying the word gender.
Biological sex can change. Unfortunately, many folks...
Demibird says, I'm intersex, you dipshit. Using these instead of gender fucking removes me from the definition of a person under the law.
Including...
They like to pretend you don't exist.
Solid conservatives.
Because you're inconvenient to their myopic worldview.
Have accepted this and don't understand the danger in using this term.
The danger. This word is dangerous. You can't use this word. It's so dangerous.
And
careful, everyone. You keep using the word gender, you're going to turn into a trans witch like me.
In fact, some conservatives have...
That's true, Baha. That's true. I don't think that's the way they're using it, but you are correct, and that is a word that could apply, yes.
Been taken this term and changed it slightly, gender as revealed at birth. The left is infiltrating our conservative organizations, Christian schools, and even churches. We must always be...
Oh my god, there's people in churches who respect people's pronouns? The horror. You know what Jesus would say to pronouns? He'd say, fuck you, bitch! And then he'd flip a table or something. I've only read the temple story.
On guard. And when a new term is introduced, ask, what is the genesis for this new term and why was it introduced? If you see the term sex assigned at birth, delete it and replace it with biological sex.
Couldn't you just control F this? Why are you manually doing this?
The next issue under gender is pronouns. Don't fall into the progressive left's
fucking pronouns
trap in regard to pronouns. Don't use them in email signature blocks, on LinkedIn, and absolutely do not ask people what their pronouns are on your first day on the job.
I like the implication that there's someone who would sign up for Project 2525 in the Trump administration, but also wants to respect people's pronouns, but is told not to in the instructional video. Like, absolutely not.
When I was at
H-Bird says, you know, there's no documentary evidence that Jesus ever said he or she, probably because the English language didn't exist 2,000 years ago, but it kind of makes you think.
USAID, managers were giving training and were told that when they have new staff or have a staff meeting, they should go around the room and ask everyone what their pronouns are.
Yeah, that's just part of introductions. That makes sense. It's just a thing. Like, even as, like, a trans person, as a trans woman, there are times that I've seen situations where pronouns are brought up and I've been like, this seems superfluous in specific situations. But it's there for a reason. It's because you don't know. You don't know who's non-binary. You don't know who's someone who's gender non-conforming. Most of the time, statistically, people are gender conforming, but that doesn't mean there always are. So it just becomes part of introductions, like when you introduce your name and job title. It's fine. It's normal. I'm sorry you don't like that this has been normalized, but it is, and it's a good thing for people. So just chill the fuck out. It doesn't hurt you in any way. Chill the fuck out.
Katie, if that happened to you, what would you do?
I think
what would you do? As if this is like a scenario that requires like, oh no, I gotta figure out an escape plan.
Political appointees, Bethany, great question, need to expect that they are going to be tested by career staff the day they walk in. So that question, every political appointee should be prepared to deal with and answer, whether it's in a training. I don't think it'll take that long. It probably will be the first couple days on the job. So
wait, is she telling them to go along with it so you don't get filtered out of the staff?
A political appointee is empowered. They are empowered because they are absolutely put in the position, whatever level it is, in order to implement the president's agenda. And that is the business of a political appointee and should be the business of all federal employees. So the answer is simple. We're here to implement the president's priorities and agenda. We are not here to discuss pronouns.
The next topic is gender-affirming care. Gender-affirming care and what the Biden administration is promoting is absolutely infuriating, especially as for parents. We need to be protecting our children from these harmful, sterilizing puberty blockers.
Children have been on puberty blockers long before this was even a discussion. They've been already prescribed for, what's it called? Something puberty, when puberty comes early. Precocious puberty? Thank you, Flower Sheeps. Precocious puberty. This is already a medication that's been approved for children and has been taken by children for decades. This isn't new. You're just upset that this time it involves trans people.
Cross-sex hormones and permanent genital mutilation. That's what gender-affirming care is.
And yes, they don't sterilize you.
Is not care at all. The idea that gender is fluid is evil.
I'm gonna go get some water. I'm out. I'll be back in just a second. Sorry you had to stare at the back of chair that time.
And it is a major initiative of the Biden administration. It's layered into each and every office.
Yeah, describing gender confirmation surgery as mutilation is akin to like saying someone who had a nose job is having, you know, rhinoplastic mutilation. Like, no, it's a consensual, like, surgery people have. Literally, gender-affirming surgery, fun fact, has a lower rate of regret than rhinoplasty. Well, that's fun. Thanks, Phoenix.
Document, task force, and funding priority. Perhaps most commonly known are the changes to Title IX, giving institutions, schools, control over children and their gender preference, working against parents.
Vito Spank, thanks for gifting a sub.
Mandating boys compete against girls. This is all done with words. Words matter. Change the words, change the culture. Now, Katie, I know that you've written several wonderful pieces on equity and you've done a lot of research on this, and the Biden administration has infiltrated equity into everything. What are your thoughts?
Oh no, not equity, the horror. H-Bird says, refusing gender-affirming care to a child that needs it is permanently disfiguring them. I wonder how she'd feel if someone strapped her down, shot her full of testosterone for a decade, and then said, okay, you can try to be a woman again, but you have to pay for it entirely yourself and everyone will discriminate against you while you do. Oh yeah, I like David Cronenberg movies in part because they're relatable. I constantly feel like I'm locked in a chamber of horrors that I can't escape underneath my own skin. I am so self-conscious of every little thing about myself that I perceive as masculine, and it drives me literally insane to the point that I want to crawl out of my skin. So, people who are against trans kids getting puberty blockers, make me hate them. You are a fucking terrible person. Fuck you. If I could have gotten these things when I was a kid, my life would be 1,000 times better. And it disgusts me that these people think they know better than doctors, or these kids, or the kids' parents even.
Equity for the next administration.
Well, it's a little heart-stopping, Bethany, and it's going to take a lot to rewind where we are right now with this, with the left's definition of equity and how that's layered into all federal government documents. Roger Severino states it perfectly in the Project 2025 Mandate for Leadership book. Quote, under President Biden, the mission has shifted from promoting equity in everything we do, end quote, for the sake of, quote, populations sharing a particular characteristic, including race, sexuality, gender identification, ethnicity, and a host of other categories, end quote. Equity no longer means all men are created equal, the cornerstone of our U.S. Constitution, but rather now mandates the government to dispense with unequal treatment in order to achieve what they believe to be equal outcomes. This creates divisiveness.
We're literally talking about opportunity. What are you talking about? Like the opportunity to compete in, like, sports that are the same as their gender? Like, that's an opportunity. That's not a result. What are you talking about? Profane Priestess says, I know everyone here knows this, but I feel obligated to point out that not all trans people pursue medical care. Not everyone goes on hormones or gets feminizing or masculizing plastic surgery. Not everyone wants to have their genitals changed. I'm on HRT and hope to get FFS, but not vaginoplasty. Moreover, male puberty destroyed my mental health. Not going through it would have saved me multiple attempts at deleting myself. Yeah.
Not equality. There is no unification under these principles. It is more of a competition of what class is more of a victim, so that particular class can receive the preferential treatment being handed out and mandated by the Biden
No, that's not what it means.
administration. It's important to note that the very first executive order that President Biden signed just moments after his inauguration on January 20th of 2021 had to do with equity. The left applauded as Biden announced his #1 priority, which is advancing racial equity and support for underserved communities throughout the federal government. As part of that executive order, within 90 days, every single agency had to file an equity action plan with the White House. If you want to see or view what you will be up against, take a look at those plans.
That sounds great.
All online under the Office of Management and Budget.
Can you believe they want to help underserved communities? We need more tax breaks for the rich!
Since that time, 9 more executive orders.
Do you remember the part where it says to promote the general welfare in the Constitution? Because she cited the Declaration, which isn't even a legal document. The Constitution says it's the government's role to promote the general welfare of its citizens. So, like, maybe shut the fuck up forever.
Have been executed by the Biden administration about equity. The latest to date is to further advance racial equity. This entails new positions and responsibilities to be embedded into every single agency and office in the federal government. And there is also a directive that all funding that is given out by the federal government prioritize unequal treatment of the American people. The noxious tenets of critical...
Noxious tenets? Treating people equally? That's a noxious tenant?
Race theory and gender ideology should be excised from curriculum.
I think you should be excised from political life. I don't think you should ever get a job in any political, like, anything ever again. You're a fool.
In every single public school in this country.
Gillis Filler says, yada yada, provide for the common defense, yada yada yada, promote the general welfare. Welfare? Reagan said I should hate that!
So Katie, this is a lot to absorb. So how do you suggest that we tackle the problem? I know you were the head of a grant office at DOJ and you had a lot of paperwork. What are your suggestions?
The fact that she had this much power, either of them had this much power, is disgusting. Like, these people are absolutely cooked in the head. I wouldn't trust them to make me a cheeseburger at McDonald's, much less run important things for the federal government.
Well, I found that developing a process for each type of document was crucial to reversing the words and definitions from the Obama administration. Here's an overall strategy to implement. First, look for any OMB, that's the Office of Management and Budget.
Amber Pretzel says, remember, these people can vote. Even more reason to go out and vote when you can.
White House Office of Management and Budget, guidance. You'll want to instruct career employees that you, whatever level you are, you want to be informed of all OMB guidance and how it is being implemented internally. Oftentimes, careers will just get an OMB circular or an OMB advice, and then they just go along and they either ignore it or they don't put it in. You want to be involved in the process. You want to...
Are these videos being widely viewed? This one only has 40,000 views so far.
Say, every single thing that comes in, I want to...
These were leaked yesterday, I believe.
Make sure that it is actually being implemented. This can easily be handled at the senior advisor or even special assistant level.
Yeah, they got leaked. They're publicly available. They're on YouTube now.
Second thing you need to do, and quickly, are look at guidance documents. Now, I've talked about this in other trainings. Guidance documents are simply a federal career employee's interpretation of a statute, of an appropriation given by Congress, of a rule or regulation, and how it's going to be implemented. A guidance document is not binding. It is simply, in some ways, just their opinion. The problem with a guidance document is that it has a tremendous amount of authority. Because if you are looking to an agency to find out what they're looking for your grant, or how your grant program will be implemented, or what rules they have around it, you're going to look at those guidance documents. They end up with a tremendous amount of authority. It really ends up being the career's agenda, being forced onto the American people. A court is the only real institution that can give us a definitive interpretation of any kind of grant program, appropriation, or rule.
Okay, but people need to make calls, and if you think it's wrong, then you're free to sue them. But other than that, things just need to be decided? Yeah.
So
that's how the system works. What?
Likely, the Office of Management and Budget will come out very quickly with a plan to take down all the guidance documents that are currently up that reflect the Biden administration's agenda. So you'll first want to look at that process. The second thing you're going to want to do, sort of the second layer, is to absolutely look at things that may not appear to be guidance documents, but are. For instance, one of the documents on our website was supposedly done by a Rutgers, professor, and so it looked like it wasn't actually career guidance. But when you really dug into the document, it was not part of any kind of grant program, and it really was just a career who asked a whole bunch of questions, and a Rutgers professor said yes. So it really, in the end, was a guidance document, and we brought it down. Another really...
So you're upset that they got guidance from a professional in whatever avenue, whatever, like, discipline this thing was on, and you're mad about it? That they asked a professional in the field? What?
Frightening example, when I was running the Office on Violence Against Women, was a provision in the Violence Against Women Act that about gender identity. And if you identified as a woman and you showed up at a woman's domestic violence shelter, you had to be accommodated.
Yeah, where do you want trans women to go if they're the victims of domestic abuse, ma'am? We're also women. I know you don't think that, but we are. So what do you want people to do?
There were lawsuits, of course, about this, as predators use that in order to gain entry.
No, that's not a thing. Predators were not using this as an excuse. Fuck off.
Into a place where there were vulnerable women. Seemed to me to be exactly opposite.
She just considers all trans women to be predators.
Opposite of,
the intention.
Yeah, the intention of the Violence Against Women Act. In any event, it was directed toward just the Office on Violence.
How do I do this so often? This is draining. Oh, my mental health is garbage.
Against.
This is just my job, and I have to do it to pay bills. Believe me, not a fan.
Women programs. It was in the Violence Against Women Act, but in the Obama...
Speaking of which, if anyone wants to help support the stream, tips, bits, subscriptions.
Administration, the entire grant-making component of the Office of Justice programs, which I later went on to
and also
run.
We're doing a patron-only live show after this, where we're doing a Tinfoil Tuesday, well, Sunday, I guess, tinfoil stream with stuff we can't normally watch on the normal streams. So join the Patreon if you'd like.
The head of that office actually wrote a guidance document that said that the provision in the Violence Against Women Act regarding to gender identity was intended to apply to every single DOJ grant program, that it wasn't limited to the Office on Violence Against Women.
Good? Good. She's mad that they're not discriminating against trans women. Phyllis Filler says, Hannah is brought to you by estrogen and by viewers like you. Thank you.
There was absolutely no indication that this was true, but you can see that just by getting that particular legislation passed and the way that the careers then interpreted it, created a complete change in culture across the Department of Justice.
It's important work, though. Could you imagine if no one ever pointed out the things you highlight? I'm not popular enough to make a difference. I don't have an audience big enough that it matters. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy doing this and I love hanging out with you guys. Well, let's not pretend I'm doing anything important.
Next step will be to read every single executive order. I would suggest that, starting with an assistant, a special assistant, a senior advisor, that you get every single executive order and put it in a binder and have that binder for the principal and make sure that it's flagged for them. There will be a lot of executive orders that come out, and some of them actually, and know this, repeal other executive orders. So you need to then pull the executive orders that are being repealed so you are very clear about what needs to be redacted. Now let's go back to that OMB tip that I gave, and just like that, you need to be part of the process that the careers are using to implement executive orders. During the Trump administration, I can tell you that executive orders were signed, fully executed, where all the guidance was given. You gave an example of this, Bethany, to our office, and I later found out that it was just simply ignored. It's not worth, the price of the paper it's written on if your careers are not implementing what the president wanted.
Phoenix says, have some cis woman goodwill. Put this towards your titty meds.
I think you can expect that equity and all of the equity executive orders under Biden will be repealed early in the next administration. This is
make sure Trump doesn't have a next administration. Go vote.
Going to require a
convince your friends to vote if they're voting Democrat. If not, I was gonna make a joke I can't make.
A detailed plan to execute the eradication of the dictates in the equity orders. For instance, there's a gender advisor position created by one of these executive orders. That position has to be eradicated, as well as all.
Why? Rick M, thanks for a 20 stream streak, says, you're important to me parasocially. Oh, thank you.
All the task forces, the removal of all the equity plans from all the websites, and a complete rework of the language in internal and external policy documents and grant applications. Which leads me to grants and rules and regulations. Well, grant and grant programs are funded with your federal tax dollars.
With everyone's federal tax dollars.
And they are appropriated by Congress. So you are told how much money you have for what particular program. And typically your appropriations language will just give a very brief description of the program. And that's the direction that Congress has given the agency. Every single grant has conditions. You want to think of this like a carrot and a stick. You can have your federal money in order to support your program, but only if you agree to certain conditions, which are built into the grants.
Gitara says, I've convinced all of my friends to vote. Turns out when they realized that the rights of their sisters and daughters are in danger, they move with purpose now. Good.
When I began at the Office on Violence Against Women, our grant applications were 75 to 110 pages long. Pages and pages of guidance that had no statutory or congressional counterpart.
Okay, they're the ones issuing the grants. They get to determine the conditions of said grants. They're just mad the government is functioning? Like, yes, things get delegated to their respective departments to make decisions because their specialty is making those decisions. Yes? Correct?
And tons of conditions. The conditions that you would need in order to receive the money. And you would need to continue to live with those conditions throughout the time of your grant. For instance, to receive grant money, certain programs would have to show a partnership with an LGBTQ support group. There was no language in the appropriation for that grant that an LGBTQ subgrantee was mandated.
Okay, so it was then determined by the committee that determines that it would. If you have a problem with that, sue them.
Careers said it was best practices, and it was an Obama administration priority. This condition on many grants funded a lot of LGBTQ organizations. So we removed that language and we removed those conditions as we wrote the grants moving forward.
That sounds like a shitty thing to do.
Rules and regulations also need ultimate political sign-off and a tremendous amount of political involvement. Your careers may...
Homoerotic race car with a $20 tip says it's my birthday, so I have a little extra money to throw around. Slides you a 20 for your mental health. Well, thank you very much, homoerotic race car. Happy birthday. You didn't have to give me anything. It's your birthday, but I appreciate it, and I hope you're having a good one.
Draft, initial, the initial documents, the rules and regulations, but there should be multiple political edits on the any final proposed rule or regulation. The left is excellent about holding up process. So you want to expect and prepare for thousands of comments coming from tons of left-supported groups on any rule that you put up. So expect that and have a plan to deal with those thousands, tens of thousands of comments in order.
People are gonna be upset when you do something wrong, so be prepared to silence those people or just ignore them, whatever works. Lennon Cat says they're not mad the government is functioning, they're mad they aren't the ones in charge. Anytime a Republican doesn't make the decision, it's corruption and overreach. Anytime a Republican makes a decision, it's small government, as well as morally and legally in line with what the Founding Fathers and their infinite holy wisdom intended. Yeah. It is interesting how people justify things to themselves.
In order to move the president's agenda, if you are prepared to deal with the comments that are coming in, then you aren't going to let them delay the rule because they have to be responded to, each one of the comments. The careers will want to follow the system that's currently in place for handling comments or conditions or how grants are written. You are empowered as a political appointee to adjust these processes as long as you are meeting all legal requirements. So you may have to deal with pushback, but really look at your process and change it. A tip here, in addition to the sheer volume of guidance and conditions to grants and explanations of proposed rules, is to ask careers to explain a grant program or the need for a rule in 2 sentences. It is...
I'm actually a complete fucking idiot, so can you explain something to me in 2 sentences? That's not how the world works. A lot of things are way more complicated than 2 sentences. Have you seen books? What the fuck are you talking about?
Is astonishing how difficult it is for a career.
Yeah, it's almost like the world's more complicated than that, you nepo baby piece of shit. What is wrong with you?
Works in the...
How stupid do you have to be to think, if it can't be explained to me in 1 or 2 sentences, then it's not legit.
A policy or grant space to actually accomplish this. And finally, use your common sense.
I don't think you have any, so I don't think you should rely on that for yourself at all.
Even if you see something that isn't directly addressed by an executive order or an OMB circular or directed by your agency head, you want to use your common sense.
Nice, Robo Twilight. Excited to see you there.
Redact the words and definitions which are weakening our nation. As we have discussed, certain words and phrases used together have hidden definitions. A really good example is social emotional learning. That's actually the new buzzword for CRT, or critical race theory.
Oh my God, what are you talking about?
Here's a tip. When you see phrases, any phrase like this, one that sounds innocuous, ask your careers to identify the origin of that phrase. Where did it come from? Why are you using that phrase particularly? What does it mean based on the original intent of those words? And then I would highly recommend you start your own research. As a last note,
yeah, CRT is a collegiate level concept.
And to read a lot of documents. Know how your careers are implementing the president's executive orders, OMB directives, and be very involved in that process. I can't stress enough the need to control all documents. Create a system where nothing goes out, nothing is published, nothing is put on your website without review by a delegated political or the principal of any office. Ask lots of questions and do not make assumptions. And finally, if a career employee rushes in and says it is an emergency, and I think a lot of people who are an assistant, chief of staff, maybe senior advisor or special assistants are going to have careers just descending on them, talking about how it's an emergency that the principal sign something. That's a red flag. Right away.
Oh no, my employees need me to do something immediately? I better not, because I don't trust them at all. Oh, that's good management. That's great. On top of all, like, the ethical stuff, you can tell that working for these people would be a fucking nightmare because they're constantly trying to negotiate their politics into every decision. They can't just fucking do the job and make sure their department is functioning. That's incredible.
It's a red flag. By the time you get into your position, you will realize that the government moves very, very slowly. Just think about your clearance process and how long that took.
Yeah, they gotta do background checks and interview your family and shit.
These documents need to be read even more carefully. If a career thinks they can push you to sign something by giving it to you at the very last minute, that will become the norm. And it will hinder your ability to actually go through a process, read things, edit things, and make sure that they are completely in line with the president's priorities and agenda. The president's
delegation, what's that?
Agenda will be in peril from your office if you allow this emergency kind of process.
Katie, that was great. Thank you for taking us through that process. Do you see? The monster is in the attic, and it is layered in virtually
the monsters are on screen. Look at them.
Document in the federal government, grant applications, rules, regulations, internal and external policy documents, guidance documents, tweets, speeches, and panels. Every one of these phrases or words that are not corrected by being redacted or rephrased is a failure of the presidency. As the Heritage Foundation's president, Dr. Kevin Roberts boldly...
The Heritage Foundation is a shitty Christian dominionist organization. Overthought, thanks for gifting a sub.
...courageously states in the mandate for...
They're also the ones behind Project 2025. I keep doing that.
...leadership. The next conservative president must make the institutions of American civil society hard targets for woke culture warriors. This starts with deleting the terms sexual orientation and gender identity, SOGI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, gender, gender equality, gender equity, gender awareness, gender sensitive, abortion, reproductive health, reproductive rights, and any other term used to deprive Americans of their First Amendment rights out of every federal rule, agency regulation, contract, grant, regulations, and
Thanks for gifting us up.
of legislation that exists. And the next conservative president will only be able to do so with your help. Are you up for this challenge? We think you are. Together, let's conquer the monsters in Uncle Sam's attic.
What creepy, creepy people. Holy crap. Let's see what we're gonna do next. I have to use the bathroom real quick, and then we'll watch this video from them on conserving America. You're back. Lennon Cat says citing the Heritage Foundation for this is like Fox News citing the New York Post or those people who append their own names to things they say like they're citing some philosopher, but somehow shittier.
Hello, I'm Matthew Spaulding, Vice President of Hillsdale College. I'm at our Washington, D.C. campus, where I'm also the Dean of the Stephen Amy Van Andel Graduate School of Government. I'd like to speak to you today about our common purpose, about America's common purpose, the things that are inherently American.
Oh my god, they're doing emotional music swelling! What the fuck?
And that are the heart of American conservatism.
In the eyes of many in the world, upper hands.
But those disagree concerning. There are many things upon which we disagree concerning domestic policy, foreign policy, economic policy. Those disagreements are important, and it's important that we discuss and deliberate and resolve those disagreements. But those disagreements should not blind us to the things we hold in common.
I didn't, Jay's a proxy.
The more important and higher aspects of America's purpose, but also the things we wish to conserve. Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton famously disagreed on just about everything you can imagine, especially when it came to important national policies. But they agreed deeply on the most fundamental questions about the rights
Like they both own slaves.
of man grounded in nature.
Oh, sorry, never mind. Thought you were going to talk about how they both owned slaves in their lifetime. Whatever. Yeah, sorry, if Hamilton the musical gave you the impression that Alexander Hamilton never owned slaves, sorry. Alexander Hamilton owned slaves.
About the essence of the rule of law and constitutional government. Those are the things that are important for us to understand, because those things, in addition to various policy matters we as conservatives hold to be true, but those things, the more fundamental things, are the essence, the foundation of conservatism. So I'm not going to talk about conservatism as much as that we wish to conserve. Those are the principles that are our inheritance, and those are the principles growing out of the Greeks and the Romans, informed by Athens and Jerusalem, going through British
Oh, God!
constitutionalism that culminate in America. So as we deliberate and discuss the policy questions that we need to determine, it is important to keep in mind the larger objective, which is to recover, to restore, to conserve, and to save our country.
Save it from what?
Every nation derives some meaning from underlying ideas, from its ethnic background, its character.
You want to roll that one back for me, Chief?
Underlying ideas, from its ethnic background, its
That seems important to point out that he said. Right? Hatred says, what does any of this have to do with anything? White nationalism, apparently. You just said it.
Underlying ideas, from its ethnic background, its character, common religion, a shared history.
He's literally doing white nationalism. He just said it. He said it out loud in this video for training people for Project 2025. He literally just said they're trying to conserve the ethnic background of America. That's white nationalism. Oh my fucking God. He admitted.
But this country is actually different.
I'm shocked he said it, not that he believes it.
It was founded at a particular time, in a particular place, by a particular people. And it is that rich heritage.
That's not a dog whistle. He just said it. He said it out loud. He said it with his whole chest.
Of ideas, especially those stated in our core fundamental documents, that define us still as a nation and as a people. America was revolutionary, but not in the way we normally think of that word, especially if we have in mind the French Revolution or the communist revolutions in Russia or Cuba.
Our revolution was very dope, actually, unlike all those bad revolutions.
It was revolutionary in the sense of ideas. It was in the minds and the hearts of the people.
Yeah, that's most revolutions. You're saying that doesn't also describe the French Revolution? Or the Soviet Revolution? Like, I understand that, like, the Reign of Terror happened and then fucking Stalin. Believe me, I know in those events, respectively. But, like, this is just true of, like, any revolution. How do you think they happen? That's kind of a prerequisite.
John Adams once wrote. That was a source of the real American Revolution. It was about the ideas upon which a nation was to be established. Ideas that are applicable to all men in all times, as Abraham Lincoln once said. And they proclaimed that principle rather than will.
Abraham Lincoln once said, I'm too drunk to eat this applesauce.
To be the ultimate ground of government. It was at a particular time in history that these universal ideas became the foundation of a particular system of government and a particular political culture. And that revolution culminated not in the guillotine, but in constitutional government.
You know, also the 3/5 Compromise, the continuing enslavement of black people in America for hundreds of years, women continuing not to have the right to vote, Catholics being considered not part of the population really either, because they're weirdo Catholics, and we're a Protestant nation. Yeah, no, man, no. It's fine to look at the good things that happened in the American Revolution, or the things that happened as a result of it, but, like, don't deify these people. That's so unhealthy. History's a pile of good things and bad things. It's okay to be like, look at the good things, but, you know, don't ignore the bad things. This is not good.
A government that is long endured. Those ideas which we want to discuss briefly, are found in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, those ideas still define us as much as they are debated in many parts of our media and culture. And they define us because our system points backward, not merely historically backward, but as a practical matter.
Thomas Jefferson thought we should rewrite the Constitution every 20 years so the next generation could have their say on the country. What are you talking about?
Our first law is our highest law, the Constitution. And our system, in principle, is built upon the foundations of the Declaration of Independence. Those ideas, that Constitution, still are beacons for everyone in the world. They're still warnings for despots around the world. And they are still the brightest lights
E plebnista
and the greatest inspiration for freedom and liberty in the world, but especially here at home. Although much of our history begins earlier, we can define the American founding period as encompassing two pivotal moments. One is between 1775, the opening, the Battle of Lexington, and the Treaty of Paris in 1783, the American Revolution. And the other is after the Revolution, in 1785, when it starts earnestly getting a movement towards the Constitution.
All right, he's just gonna opine. I want to find another section where they're talking about, like, their operations stuff. This one, working with the media. Oh my god, do they have a priest doing this one?
Hi, I'm Alexei Walternist. During the Trump administration, I served as the Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs at the Department of Homeland Security, and I was also a
They got Rasputin?
spokesman at the Department of Justice. Previous to that, I worked on Capitol Hill at the Republican Study Committee. Currently, I am the co-founder of Athos, a communications and literary agency, and I am also an Eastern Catholic priest, where I serve my parish in Lansing, Michigan. Today,
why is he in Michigan?
I'll be teaching you how to work with the media.
In the eyes of many in the world, this every 4-year ceremony we accept as normal is nothing less than a miracle.
In America, we understand that a nation is only living as long as it is striving.
Only a few generations have been granted the
I hope some of my experience can be helpful to you, as I could teach you some of the tricks of the trade and some of the pitfalls that many people fall into in these positions. But also, hopefully I can give you a framework so that as you prepare to enter into an administration, there's some work you can do now so that when the time comes, you'll be able to serve the American people faithfully. The first place to start is having some sort of self-ownership. We've seen this time and time again during Republican and conservative administrations, where you have staff who come in, particularly in the communications space, and they don't quite have the self-ownership, or they have some sort of inferiority complex where they crave approval from the media for doing their job, particularly from media that is hostile to them or doesn't support the president's agenda. And you'll notice time and time again, for those staffers who go in, they frankly embarrass themselves because they're craving that approval. So going into a conservative administration, it's always a good time to take stock into what you are getting into. The first thing is, are you getting into it because you're looking to build your public profile or to set yourself up for a great career after the fact? If you are going into a conservative administration, odds are that that will not happen. It is simply the nature of the politics. If you're going into a liberal
Why don't people like us?
administration,
It's almost like we're fucking assholes.
after you finish, there's the big payouts, the Fortune 500 company jobs, the big lobbying jobs, the big spokesperson jobs. That frankly doesn't exist for a lot of those who work in a conservative administration.
That's objectively untrue. Big business is full of right-wing people. They're giant mega corporations. What are you talking about?
And the reason I bring this up is because oftentimes when communications and working with the media goes wrong, it's because folks are trying to audition for those jobs throughout their entire tenure. Which brings me to one of my important points, which is you're entering into public service. So the nature of public service is you're there to serve the American public, you're there to serve the president, which they elected, and done right, you give more than you get back. So the whole mentality of you're going in to advance your career, to make a name for yourself, or to find some promising, lucrative job after the fact, it's very misguided, but also it's very transparent, and you can tell that's what people are in it for. If you give that up and you're willing to go in to genuinely serve the public, not advance your own interest, and realize that done right, odds are
they're not talking about Congress, Freyline.
They're
talking about people who work in different executive offices that work at the discretion of the executive branch. So they're talking about like different departments that fall under that branch.
The best job prospects, if working in a Republican administration, you're already going to be better off. Because every time you talk with the media, you're going to be dedicated to the important things. What is my job in disseminating information to the public? You're not going to be seeking their approval. And you're going to be focused on implementing the president's agenda. And you're going to also keep touch with the American people. Oftentimes when you're communicating with the public, you can feel this pressure from legacy, mainstream, liberal media outlets.
They're literally using terms like liberal media. Like, do they really not understand that, like, to most of the country, Trump's policies are unpopular? He has never won the popular vote. He has never been popular. You're going to get asked questions about your unpopular ideas, and it's not because of the liberal media. It's because most of the country doesn't agree with you, and the only reason you have a shot in national elections is because of our antiquated electoral college system.
To tell them what they want to hear, rather than what the people elected for the president to enact. Also, in working with the media, it's important to realize your place in the whole process. Oftentimes, individuals will look into working in communications or public affairs, and they look at the people who are in front of the camera as their idols, and they think that this is something that they are going to be working towards, whether it's White House press secretary or other.
Why would anyone want to be the White House press secretary? What a thankless, awful job where you just gotta. And I'm even saying this for like administrations I've liked. It's a job where you gotta just bullshit constantly. It's just not worth it. Who wants that fucking job?
Jobs where you're regularly on TV driving the message. Most people who are working with the media, the large number of Schedule C appointees or even presidential appointees that are working in communications, you're not going to be in front of the camera. And this is important to realize because you're going to be working on things very differently. You're going to be working to get buy-in on processes, and you're not going to be working with the media directly to get your name in something. The best people who work in communications in a government administration, oftentimes they are unnamed. They're the people that are doing the briefing books for the White House press secretary. They're doing briefing books for cabinet secretaries, or even lower level undersecretaries, assistant secretaries, or just lawyers working on a case. It's important to keep in mind that these jobs are all equally important in running an effective communications operation. The person in front of the camera relies on numerous people who are working behind the camera. And getting the facts right and prepared, negotiating bookings, negotiating print interviews, that is all necessary to get out the job of the administration and to communicate effectively. Whenever people are in these jobs, they can often get this type of complex where if only I do enough behind camera work, then I'll get in front of the camera. But oftentimes this is misguided because
it's so funny. It feels like he's just telling people, like, don't expect to get famous. Like, who's joining this shit to be famous? To be a fucking staffer for the federal government?
The press releases are and how you're going to engage with the media, ultimately they are right. You are just the distributor. But successful communicators, they don't accept that mantle. Instead, they endeavor to become subject matter experts themselves. Are you going to be as proficient and in the weeds as someone who is a direct operator? So for example, if you are doing a press release for ICE or Border Patrol or a U.S. Attorney's Office and you're working on charging documents, are you going to be as in the weeds on particular forms and how things work? The answer is no, but you do need to understand how things are so that when a reporter calls, you actually know more than they do. You know how the process works, and you know how you can add value to reporting.
I feel like if you're working for the Trump administration or any conservative administration, the idea that you have more knowledge than a journalist on a particular topic is pretty unlikely.
So whenever you talk with media, doing your homework to become a subject.
Royal Ann with a $2 super chat says, sounds kind of bitter? Yeah, a little bit, doesn't it?
Matter expert is invaluable.
Maybe he was projecting. I hadn't considered that. Maybe he wanted to be famous.
Also, it gets you out of this system where you're just a booker, where you're just setting someone up with the real experts.
Since I live in Michigan, if I ever see this guy, I'll give him the finger for you guys.
Homework.
I'll be like, yay, Project 2025. I know that's pretty cringe, but it would make me feel good.
You read the policy papers, you read the charging documents, you read the underlying source materials for a press release. When the media calls, you can actually set them on the things that are important, and then you can set the narratives.
Credibility is key.
Another important matter to understand is your duties as a political appointee. Whenever you're in a position like this, you are in a position of the public trust, where you work on behalf of the American people, and you also have another job to implement the agenda of the president who is elected. Oftentimes, when people are in these positions, they'll talk about political appointees.
Who is this man and why is he dressed like an Orthodox priest? Because he's a Russian Orthodox priest that's working with Project 2025. This is one of their training videos.
Almost as they're ruining a system that's working effectively without them. But actually the opposite is true. Without political appointees, the government has no real way to implement the will of the president. That is a bureaucracy who is running things rather than the president himself. So when you're in these positions, you do have certain duties that you should be fulfilling. The first is...
I'm not going to get too specific, but Baja just texted me and reminded me I think we have actually run into this guy before elsewhere in Michigan at an event that happened where he was protesting and like doing like weird shit into a megaphone and telling people to repent. So I think I've actually run into this guy.
Communicating effectively regular government functions. There is the functions of the government that happen with or without political appointees, whether it's law enforcement, whether it's regulatory enforcement, and simply informing the public of what we think of as these routine things is one of our duties as a communicator when you work with the media. The second is, how are you
Mellow Honey, thanks for 7 months.
Implementing the agenda of the president? And this, simply put, is what makes us a republic, where the people have a government that works for them. And at this point, largely, it is consisting of career bureaucrats.
Again with this shit, yes! Yep! The government requires people to just enact things and do the job. If you changed out those people every 4 to 8 years, the government would cease to function.
And the way that we're actually a republic is
a democratic republic.
The American people empower certain individuals to control this government. The career officials are there to arguably keep the regular functioning parts of the government running.
Literally, yes. It's not even. It's anything but. It's only arguable. If you were to argue against that, you would sound like an idiot. That's their job.
But the political appointees are there to be the direct will of the people in implementing the president's agenda. And when you are in these positions, particularly when you're communicating with the media, it is important to let them know this thing that you elected the president to do, they are doing it. When you are in these positions, you're going to get pressure from officials, whether they're in the media or whether they're career officials, that, oh, you can't do that, that's too political. I'm not talking about vote getting where, oh, you're doing this action and you're directly saying, vote for this candidate. But oftentimes they have trouble discerning the line.
What, like you want to disenfranchise queer people and they don't like that? And you're like, no, it's fine, do it though. Gitara says, oh shit, I've seen him at Yucamon in Detroit. He was yelling at all of us cosplayers, telling us to repent and that we're going to hell. I recall one of the attendees yelled back at him, cool cosplay, bro, what anime are you from? Yeah, this guy must just go around the state and do stupid bullshit. No wonder he's part of this fucking shit show organization.
Where, oh, the president campaigned on doing this thing, and therefore, if he talks about it...
Sina Diorito, thanks for following.
Or you, as a political appointee, are talking about how the president promised this and he's fulfilling it, all of a sudden it's political and you cannot do it. But rather, you have to have the framework where this is what real government looks like. This is what a republic looks like. Where if the president campaigned on something and the American people voted for that to be implemented, and you can't talk about it, we cease to be a republic. So nevertheless, during your service, if you are in one of these positions, you're probably going to be faced with some pressure where we can't get into this issue because it's too political. As long as you're not talking about vote getting, odds are it's fine. One anecdote on this. In the Department of the Interior, during the Trump administration, the digital team, where they created digital content for the secretary and the cabinet agency, they were told that their content was too political and that they had to have a career lawyer sign off on all their content before it was ever posted. This eventually led to a system which was accepted where political individuals would take content that they were talking about how they were implementing the president's agenda, and then they had career bureaucrats who were unelected and unaccountable to the...
so they tried to make it nonpartisan, because I assume it was a Trump fluff piece, basically. It sounds to me like Trump was trying to get them to put out basically Trump propaganda, and people in the system were like, that's not our job.
American public then say this content is or is not acceptable to communicate to the American public. So if you're ever in one of these positions, I recommend, number one, you have the best framework and mentality for what your value add is to constitutional government, but also understand that is not normal. You should be talking with lawyers, particularly politically appointed lawyers, and ask them, is this legal? There's also situations which are illegal where political individuals will be reporting to career officials, and that is not supposed to be happening. If you ever find yourself in one of these positions, you should be speaking with the general counsel at your agency or other lawyers, because this cuts directly against constitutional Republican government. Next, I want to talk to you about how the media works. You may think, I work with the media all the time already, or I watch the news all the time. I know how they work.
I can't wait to hear his conspiratorial pap about how he thinks the media works. Phoenix with 100 bits says, I can't usually take the psychic damage of Chud Watch streams, but I've stayed for this one. Does it always feel like we're in trauma bonding? Yeah, pretty much. Unfortunately.
But
call to action time. If you want to support the stream, you can do so via memberships, subscriptions, gift subs, bits or tips. Continuing.
Perhaps there's some insights I have in working with them in the way I have that can help you do your job a little better. The first place to start is understanding the media and what their interests are. So largely you can put the media into
I don't know what his qualifications are. Like, why is he claiming that he has... I don't know. I couldn't tell you.
Categories. There's the legacy, what many people will consider the traditional media. That consists of...
Oh, he worked for Homeland Security? Jesus Christ, what was his position?
Cable news channels, the legacy place...
Was he appointed? Was he a Trump appointee like the other ladies were?
Is like the New York Times, Washington...
Again, I remind you, this is a guy that I'm pretty sure goes out and yells at, like, queer people with a fucking megaphone. And he worked for the Department of Homeland Security. Yikes.
Washington Post, as well as the networks, ABC, CBS, NBC. The second category is...
There it is. Thank you, Baha. Alexei Voltornsky. Oh, boy. An assistant secretary for public affairs, Alexei Voltornist oversees the Department of Homeland Security's public outreach and media relation efforts. He also directs the department's strategic, incident, and internal communications and serves as the principal communications advisor to the Secretary of Homeland Security. For almost a decade, Mr. Voltornist has advised nonprofits and government leaders on public affairs and government relations strategies. He recently served as public affairs officer at the Department of Justice and communications director at the House of Representatives Republican Study Committee under the chairmanship of Representative Mark Walker. So he's all up in the Republican stew.
What many would consider the more political or partisan media, which would include outlets that most of you probably read, like The Federalist, The Daily Caller, The Washington Free Beacon, The Daily Signal. Oftentimes people will get into political positions and then they have this mentality that I mentioned before, this inferiority complex, where they crave the mainstream media's attention. They crave their approval. And they act like the conservative media is some sort of second-tier media.
I mean, I would argue it is.
This whole mentality...
It's a grift. It's a big grift. It exists as an alternative to reality for people who can't hack it in the real world.
Frankly betrays the trust of the American people. The American people read all kinds of outlets, and also different kinds of Americans read different kinds of outlets. If I'm a conservative, odds are I'm not reading the Washington Post or New York Times.
Maybe you should get a variety of views from across the spectrum of media. Have you considered? Because that's like a normal thing to do. I wanted to say Mark Wahlberg. But this guy isn't committed a hate crime to my knowledge, unlike Mark Wahlberg.
The first place to start is understanding what each media venue can bring to the table. With the legacy media, it is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Like most of them, their premise for making money is simply getting eyeballs on their content so they can sell ads. And the way they often do this is by creating salacious content. But also, in the modern era, they appeal to a certain type of political leaning. So if you ask most people, it's pretty clear that most mainstream media outlets are to the left.
They really, really aren't. Like, the closest thing is MSNBC, and they're, like, neoliberal. CNN got bought out by a right-winger who's been switching it to basically Fox News Light. Like, nah, it's just not the case. It isn't.
Remember how I talked about having some sort of self-ownership before you go into serve in an administration? This is where it becomes important. Because if you are working with a New York Times reporter who covers your beat or whatever you're responsible for communicating to the American public. If you are in a position where you crave their approval, you're going to mess up. You're going to do something wrong. If the New York Times is writing a glowing profile on you, the person who's supposed to be behind the scenes, you're doing something wrong.
If people like you, you're doing something wrong is such a Trump administration belief, isn't it?
Not only because you're frankly getting a little outside of your lane, but also because they are certainly to the left, and if you're serving a conservative administration, you should not be getting glowing reviews from the left. Oftentimes, people will satisfy trying to build relationships with these legacy outlets, and they will try to get their approval by leaking. Most of the time, if you're a reporter at the New York Times or Washington Post, they want leaks. That's how they drive that salacious news that gets clicks.
I mean, if you're doing something wrong, it should get leaked to the press. That's kind of a big part of the press and their function.
Can guarantee
they don't function perfectly, far from it. The profit motive in media has completely fucked the whole system. But yeah, if an organization is doing something wrong or sus or questionable, it should get leaked to the media, because transparency is the ideal for government.
To you, they are not working with you if you're in a conservative administration to implement the president's agenda.
H. Baird says, a lot of this is conservatives not having the coping skills to get over things. In 2008, the mainstream media lost a lot of objectivity, and many outlets seemed to be openly pro-Obama. Republicans are still salty over it.
Actually,
I don't remember that enough to comment on it.
The contrary. They want leaks to stymie any type of conservative administration agenda.
And that would be pretty ironic, too, considering Fox News and its function,
So this is important to keep in mind, because whenever you're in a position of trust for the public, there are these many opportunities to leak information to the press, where almost every time it is not in your interest. But the thing that they always try to dangle in front of you is, oh, you're going to get that lunch meeting or that coffee meeting with this legacy outlet, and they're going to say how helpful you were.
Gitara says, chud voice. I don't even know what that means. I, a staunch red-blooded American, don't make money off ads or bureaucrats. You can rest assured that I will stay honorable. That's why I sell my honor-bound male growth supplements and bull elephant testosterone pills. Use code HONOR today to get a 10% discount on your next purchase. Anyways, I'll never do ads. I can't be bought.
It's not that helpful.
Wait, Trump thinks Biden's gonna come back? He said it again? He said it again? He keeps saying this. He's just writing his Wattpad fan fiction.
I hear he's going to make a comeback at the Democrat convention. He's going to walk into the room and he's going to say, I want my presidency back. I want another chance to debate Trump. I want another chance.
Trump is so desperate. So pathetic. He's gonna be watching the DNC like any minute now. Joe's gonna come out and I can use my old insults again.
To you. It's not that helpful to the president's administration. And they're trying to get you to trade in your access and your promise to implement the president's agenda so that they can get their next headline. And the second category is the conservative media outlets. In working with conservative media outlets, it's important to understand their role in this whole system. The American people who vote for a conservative presidential administration, they're not reading the New York Times. They're not reading the Washington Post. Actually, to the contrary, if those outlets publish something, they're going to assume it's false.
Oh my God! They're literally just telling them, well, like, the people that matter to us don't care, so whatever.
So the only way to reach them with any voice of credibility is through working with conservative media outlets. For many of these people, if it's not in these conservative outlets, it didn't happen or it's not true. And that's simply the result of the past decades where legacy media have attacked conservatives and then shown that they're lying or reporting something that is false. So the conservative media can bring a certain credibility to the table, but also they can bring a reach that you can't have otherwise. So in any type of communication strategy, they should be a large part so that you can effectively communicate with the American people who put you in the position that you could be holding. And when you're working with the media, it's important to keep in mind standards of what you're trying to accomplish. If I'm a legacy media outlet, I'm not going to be writing about how some conservative policy, whether it's taxes, energy reform, religious liberty, I'm not going to be writing, if I'm working at one of these legacy outlets, about how whatever the president did is so great for the American people. They're not going to be doing it. It's just...
I mean, Trump would first have to do something that's good for American people. He hasn't, so I guess he'd have to test it to find out.
It's on their interest. The reporters don't politically align that way. Even more so, their editors do not align that way. And they don't want to make a conservative administration look like they're effective in doing their job. So what do you want to get from them? One method is sometimes people just write these outlets off wholesale, where that strategy sometimes has its merits, but more often than not, the American people do deserve to know what's happening, and they read these outlets. So what is the value that these outlets can bring to the table? Simply put, they can factually cover what is occurring. So should you be fighting with them on how everything the president did is really great? You should certainly be having that fight, but odds are they're not going to write a glowing piece. But
come on, write about how good our wannabe dictator is.
Actually capture everything that's happening and any data that you can bring to support on how it's good for the American people. That's something you should certainly be fighting for. But also, you shouldn't be getting into their game where you're looking at everything from their worldview, where what the American people elected the president to do is bad. You should never give up that fight, but also, you don't need to waste your time if you're not going to convince them.
Did he just tell them to not try and see it from the other people's point of view? Jesus Christ.
And the second category is the conservative media outlets. Sometimes they need a little more help, where here is something factually that's happening, but also here is how it ties in with the president's agenda.
I'm sorry, are you telling your government officials under your purview to direct media outlets in specific messaging for the president? Because that's what it sounds like he's telling them to do.
That your readers largely support. Sometimes this takes some extra background calls. Sometimes this takes giving them some scoops so that they can get ahead of the coverage.
He is literally telling them leak things and give directives to right-wing press in order to direct narratives. Holy fuck.
It's also important to keep in mind the resource disparity. If I'm a legacy media outlet, I have hundreds or sometimes even thousands of reporters that I can throw on beats upon beats. For example, Bloomberg. They have hundreds of reporters that will write up nearly every single legal filing of note, every single regulation of note. And they basically have the resources to cover almost everything of substance coming out of an administration, especially if it's going to make someone money. Whereas if I'm a conservative outlet, oftentimes they're running on a scale that is smaller. They don't have the sheer number of reporters that are able to cover every microbeat. So sometimes if you're going to send out a press release, the Bloomberg type will pick it up, and sometimes one of these conservative outlets, they may want to cover it, but they just don't have the resources. So in order to reach the audience of the American people that support the president's agenda, sometimes you need to do a little bit of hand-holding, where you reach out to an editor beforehand, you can embargo something, and help them with their resource allocation just by simply giving them a heads up.
Literally tipping off right-wing news outlets so they can set the narrative first based on instructions from the fucking presidential administration. The thing he's accusing the left of, he is literally giving instructions on how to do. These hypocritical, projecting pieces of shit.
The last matter I want to discuss is the tactics that you have at your disposal to communicate with the American people. One of the large tools that you're going to do this with is press releases. For those of you who have served, you'll be familiar with this phenomenon. And for those of you who haven't served in a presidential administration, this is how it usually works. You go into the office, then you get a call.
Sorry, real quick, I got sent a funny Trump thing. Has anyone noticed that Kamala cheated at the airport? There was nobody at the plane, and she AI'd it and showed a massive crowd of so-called followers, but they didn't exist. She was turned in by a maintenance worker at the airport when he noticed the fake crowd pictures. There was nobody there, later confirmed by the reflections of the mirror-like finish on the vice president's plane. She's a cheater, she had nobody waiting, and the crowd looked like 10,000 people. Same thing is happening with her fake crowds and speeches. This is the way the Democrats win elections, by cheating, and they're even worse at the ballot box. She should be disqualified because of the creation of fake image. It's election interference. Anyone who does that will cheat at anything.
Call from someone possibly deep in the organization.
Again, they're just cooked. They're cooked in the brains.
Hey, I have a press release that needs to go out today. Can you send it out? If that's where you're at, something has gone wrong already. This gets into this mentality that I mentioned before, where the communicators just simply are distributors of information. Rather, you should be in the driving seat. You should be crafting the message.
Yes, that's a real thing he said. It's from his Truth Social account.
You should be bringing in key information on how it implements the president's agenda to make Americans' lives better. And if a press release is already drafted, it's too late. If there is a regulation or some sort of charge from law enforcement or some sort of policy change, you really need to be part of the discussion in the first place. And the reason for this...
Just so chat knows, Hannah breaks out the Trump impression around the house randomly too. Of course I do. When you have a skill, why wouldn't you utilize it? This is why so many people are so poor. They don't understand. They should take their skills and apply them in everyday life. Okay? These Democrats, this Democrat Party, they don't know how to make money. Okay?
Is, like I mentioned before, if you're a policymaker, they can get so in the weeds that they can become disconnected from the American people. But also,
Are we the ones disconnected with the American people? No, it's the media that's wrong.
Think about how to package it to the American people or how it could be received by the American people. They can just...
Exhausting!
Frankly get...
How dare you? I'm not exhausting. I'm downright pleasant to be around.
Tunnel vision, and that's the value add for communicators. You're regularly engaging with the media. You're regularly engaging with the American people through the public sentiment on social media and such, that you really can bring something to the conversation.
It is going to be sad if Trump doesn't win, because I'll have fewer opportunities to use that stupid fucking voice.
I know how intimidating it can be when you're...
From Dronder. It's a tremendous impression, perhaps... Wait, hold on. China! Donald Trump. I gotta talk like Donald Trump. It's a tremendous impression, perhaps the greatest impression in human history.
In an agency, say the Department of Justice, you're the only person who didn't get a law degree from an Ivy League university, and they're talking about some important regulation. I know how intimidating it can be to really offer your 2 cents, but I assure you, that's what the American people want you to do. They want someone who is implementing the president's agenda and bringing that to fruition. So if you're ever in those positions, don't be shy. The president or the White House put you in this position to do this very thing. And also, you're reading a lot of media, and that actually is an important perspective to bring to the table.
Utara says, Chuds have been AI generating images of, quote, Democrat crowds and then going, Kamala's crowd looks off to me, while zooming into the usual mistakes AI image generators make. Too many few fingers, fucked up eyes, too many teeth, illegible writing. Chuds are the ones generating fake evidence to smear Kamala, not the other way around. Which I find to be weird. Like, the rallies thing does not materially matter, but they hyped themselves up about rally size so much It's like they think Trump invented political rallies and that no one has had big rallies before him. So they put themselves in a position where they need to believe her rallies are fake, because in their own worldview, that's devastating for them. Tea with Goblins, thanks for gifting a sub. Much appreciated.
So it can be as simple as, okay, well, what is the strategy going to be in implementing this regulation? Simply sending out a press release.
If Barron Trump ever runs for president, I can pretend to be his dead father from the grave, like Hamlet. Barron, let me tell you, your uncle. No, it's just Hamlet. That's not even a joke. That's just me doing Hamlet as Trump. That's not a joke, Hannah. That's not a joke at all. That's just a thing you're doing.
Is usually the proposal from most people who don't do communications. Usually, I'm working on a regulation if I'm a policy person. What am I going to do? Send out a press release, and then they call it a day. And then you'll get the call a few days later. Why isn't anyone covering my press release? Well, usually it's because it's boring. Where your job is to make sure it connects with the American people and it connects with the media. So if you're part of these policy planning discussions, you can help them craft the message from the beginning so that it's not turning around a ship at the last minute. You can make sure things largely stay on track up until the point of the press release. So once you're at the point of the press release, most of your work is done. The messaging is lined up, the way that the regulation is branded. And also
is Barron going to be the 17th Doctor? If Barron Trump was cast as the Doctor, I'm going to burn every piece of Doctor Who, everything I own. And that's a lot of Blu-rays, so that should tell you something. I have the biggest Blu-ray collection. It is the best. It is the biggest. It is the most incredible collection of cinematic films in the history of all films. I have horror. I have sci-fi. I have adult drama. Okay? I have every film that you could ever want to watch. I watch it whenever I want. I just take the disc and I put it in my player and it plays. Beautiful. Perfect. Believe me.
Rollout. You can also factor in other things on exclusives, whether it's a broadcast exclusive with an interview with a principal.
Phoenix 2250 with some bits says, take my last bits in support of doing Trump's voice around the house. Thank you.
Or whether it's a print exclusive.
Yeah, I saw the Vance background. For those that didn't see, they did a banner that was supposed to say, like, Kamala Chaos, but people stood in front of it, so it just looks like he's standing in front of a Kamala sign. I miss the Four Seasons landscaping. That was a fun arc.
You can factor that into the rollout beyond just a press release. Because oftentimes, if there is any type of big policy change, it's because something's going to hit the Federal Register, or something's going to be out today. And calling a reporter up and saying, hey, this thing's happening in 2 hours, is going to get you different coverage than, I'm alerting you, here's an embargo, here's the actual regulation, here's the actual...
Yeah, I saw they played the Titanic theme.
Press release is coming in...
They also played Send in the Clowns. Pretty funny.
Week. That's going to generate you better coverage, but also it will improve your relationships. It will help you have credibility with reporters so that they really know you're part of the process and an insider, and they're going to work with you differently. And this gets me to another important point, which is simply to pick up the phone. When you're working with press releases, it's very simple to just get in this email mode where everything is emailed and you communicate with reporters, everything in writing. If you look at the great communicators who get points on the board, they're talking to reporters. When a reporter reaches out...
Remind me never to go into public relations. I don't like talking on the phone.
Any type of...
I just realized this is sort of like a one-way phone call with over 300 people, and that makes me nervous for a job I've been doing for years.
Regulation or anything you're doing a press release on, you become a subject matter expert.
Unstable Deadbeat with 100 bits says maybe that wasn't a mistake. Maybe they actually wanted to make it look like Vance supports Kamala as a way to make her look bad. Almost on a hype train.
Expert, and you can walk them through what it's actually going to accomplish. You're going to demonstrate to the reporter you know more than them because you've been doing your homework. And also, you know more than them because you're part of the deliberations. So As you're part of these deliberations, you can figure out what is in the interest of the American public, where you can show you're implementing the president's agenda, and you can communicate that to a reporter in the appropriate way, whether it's on background, on the record, off the record, and you can also craft the storyline in ways that you can't in writing. As you're part of all of these deliberations and forming the policy, you want to just make sure that you're part of the conversation. And one way that you can do that is simply by showing up and doing your job.
Gitara with 200 bits says, and then Paul said, let there be hype. Nemesaur gives 20 tier 1 subs, which kicks off and absolutely beats the hype train to death. So thank you very much, Nemesaur. That's so generous, and thank you, Gitara, for kicking off the hype train.
So if you are given a certain portfolio at a cabinet agency...
That's a sub drop. Look at that. It's a girthy sub drop.
Or if you're at the White House...
84% to level 5 on the hype train.
You should be regularly talking with those who are implementing some sort of policy. You shouldn't only be seeing them when, hey, there's a press release ready to go out. You should be checking in with them every day or so. Hey, what do you have coming down the pipeline? Hey, here's a news story that we could use your help on. And when you're part of the process and you let policymakers know that by working with you, they're going to get better coverage, it's going to be more factual, conservative media is going to be trumpeting how great this priority is.
Yeah, obviously. You already talked about how they're basically in your pocket, and you just tell them what to say.
And this policy is, you're going to be brought into the process earlier, so you can help craft the policies.
Vito Spank,
so you can
thanks
help
for
craft
100
the
bits.
messaging. So you can help craft the strategy. And that's when the calls come in, and you can really do your job effectively. And that's how you break out of this mold that many communicators find themselves in, where you're just simply a person on a screen pressing send on an email that goes to everyone too late in the process. Another important tool that you'll have is background briefings. A lot of the magic that happens in communicating what a president or his administration is doing happens in ways that aren't even directly reported. These are background calls, off-the-record calls.
Cripple Punk, thanks for 1, 2, 3, 4, 500 bits.
And other types
Getting us over level 5 of the hype train. There's also a hydrate. Will do. Level 5 complete. Thank you so much. Everyone's so generous today.
The briefings where you'll give out access to high-ranking or sometimes mid-level officials in order...
By the way, we're going to be almost done for the day, so probably around the time this video finishes, we're going to finish. Like I said, I'm doing a patron-only stream after this, where we're going to be covering conspiracy theories that we don't normally cover on the regular stream, so if you want to come to the secret tinfoil stream, make sure you join the Patreon. As far as these other videos, we will be watching them throughout the week. I think we're going to continue doing at least 1 or 2 more episodes of these Project 2025 training videos, because there are so many of them. So make sure you check out that, because, like, I know this is kind of hard to sit through, but I do think it's important as politically engaged people to know what these people are saying. That way you can talk about it with other people, and if someone brings up some bullshit, you can be like, well, I watched their training videos, and here's things they said. So keep an eye out for those streams in the upcoming week.
In order to condition coverage in the long term. For mainstream outlets, you can make sure that they understand the issue better so they can be more factual. Or for conservative outlets, you're helping them understand issues so that they can see how it ties in with the president's agenda and how he's implementing it. As you're doing these background calls, they can be very helpful, but sometimes working with decision makers, they might not see the value because they're not getting a clip right away. They're not getting some glowing review or write-up. That gets back to one of the first points I made on credibility. The media needs to understand that you are a gatekeeper and that you're going to help them do their job, and you need to create an incentive structure where...
He's literally talking about access media. He's literally talking about, you need to make it clear to these media organizations that they need to spin the narratives that are positive for us, and if they don't, we're not going to talk to them. How does he say this and not realize how fucking disgusting it is? Like, he's the bad guy. You're literally dressed like a bad guy from a video game. Like, what are you doing?
They want to come to you rather than go around you. So by helping them do their job better, by setting them up with important officials who are making decisions, you can help them trust you that you're in the know, but also help them come to you when they're writing a story. You'll also be faced with many instances where, from legacy outlets, they're writing a damaging story about someone or something or some agency that you're responsible to be their spokesman for. There's one tactic that I think is particularly effective in this. It doesn't hurt to just stop and take stock and say, what are the facts as you understand them? What facts can I give you that could tell you that you're wrong?
That would be your job, wouldn't it? It's not their job to tell you what you could say to change their mind. What?
And that oftentimes will take them...
What can I say to manipulate you to write the copy I'd like you to? Because I am willing to say anything you want, quite frankly.
Aback, because they're never really asked that. And also you can ask them about how they're doing their job. You can say, okay, you're writing this story. Am I the last call that you're making? Who else have you talked to? Have you been researching this? Or ask them about...
And then ask to speak to the manager of the media.
How they...
That'll help. How... Does he understand how condescending this is? Like, this is not good communication with the media. This is just trying to be condescending towards the media.
Came to the conclusions they have. Some of the more honest reporters will tell you point blank, I haven't talked to as many people as I would have liked to, or I don't know as much as I should. And sometimes, even with these legacy outlets, you can fill in important information that they would not have otherwise. As long as they're being honest with you in their limitations, that usually shows some sort of humility that they're willing to work with you and get things right.
And of course, it's only right to say good things about the Republican administration.
Another one of the tools that a communicator has in your toolbox that's very important is op-eds and speeches. If you're working with a cabinet official or even many of the lower ranking officials, there are a lot of speeches.
Thank you for the hype train, everyone.
That these principals will give. Many times in any type of communications office, this is how it happens. You're a speechwriter, or you're in the speechwriting office, or you're someone who's just designated to write speeches. You get a calendar invite, and you're told, we need a speech by this date. And then you draft it. Or sometimes the principal will draft it themselves and just send it to you to send out. Whenever principals will put something on the calendar for a speech, or they draft something, sometimes they'll think of it just as a regular churn. But this is really missing many of these big opportunities for speeches and for op-eds. Think of all the speeches that were given in any presidential administration, and then think of how many that you have seen where someone sent it to you and said, oh my gosh, have you seen this speech? They said things that I've thought about it, but they've never put it like that. They were so right.
Never? What?
These are one of these few
That's weird.
Opportunities where we can really have thought leadership. Most of what you do in communicating is contributing to the churn. It's the daily breaking news of some regulation or policy change or some military conflict or crisis. But speech writing is the ability to set trends in the long run, to pave an intellectual framework that you can go down as you're implementing the president's agenda. And if you remember this, you can really take speeches and op-eds and turn them into what they should be. Opportunities to tell Americans how you're improving their lives, and also to sell a vision. Oftentimes, we have this vision setting during presidential campaigns, and then it kind of peters out once the government power is taken by a presidential candidate and they're actually sworn in as president. Yet, if you think of many of the big speeches, like Reagan's City on a Hill speech, that was given while he was president, or the Tear Down This Wall speech. Those are these opportunities that we should be going for. These are really hard moments to create, but we have enough of the tools to do it. So inevitably, there is a time crunch. You are going to have to do some of these churn speeches, but they should really be avoided. When you leave the administration, you don't want to be thinking, man, I had all these opportunities to tell these great stories, to sell the
Hinchilart,
American
thanks for
dream
following.
or to lay out a vision for what America could be. Before you get in, and when you're in, don't get stuck in the churn and think, what would a life-changing speech look like? What would a speech be like that everyone is talking about for the next few months? Does a speech look like that the New York Times editorial board is going to have a meltdown over? If you're doing that, odds are you're doing something
Oh,
right.
wow, there's a new poll where Harris and Trump are tied in North Carolina, and it's an A-rated poll. That's surprising.
And you need to think about selling something that gets the American people excited because you're genuinely going to help them. While certainly I couldn't cover everything you need to do to be successful in serving as a communicator in a presidential administration and working with the media, hopefully...
Lennon Cat says, we often have this great energy when a president makes promises to the people about how they're going to make their lives better, but then when politicians take office, that energy and happiness dies off for some unknown reason.
I gave you enough tools that you need to understand what you would be taking on. Ultimately, the most important thing is the commitment to public duty. If you're going into public service to get something from it, rather than to give to your country, you're getting into it for the wrong reasons. Everyone you work with will be able to see through it. Albeit, many of them are in that public service position because they're trying to get something out of it. But if you truly decide to make a sacrificial move and sacrifice for your country, and that's your reason for serving, everyone will be able to tell, and your country will be better for it. But also, you'll be better for it. Whenever you speak with the legacy media, you're not going to live in fear of them. You're going to encounter them as someone entrusted by the American public.
Are Republicans afraid of the media?
And they will notice. They'll notice that you don't...
Because I know they don't like them, but I never considered that they're afraid of them.
Their approval, because you're speaking with the approval of the American people. Whenever you're working with writing speeches or op-eds, you will have a conviction that the American people put you in this position, and that you won't have any type of inadequacies or any other complexes that you're trying to flesh out in your speeches. You're going to be focused on delivering what the American people want, and that is, simply put, a constitutional government. You're coming in to implement the will of the people, the will of the president, and simply put, to help the government function. Thank you.
Yeesh. All right. So thanks everyone for hanging out today while we covered this. I know that there's some points that get a little dry, but certainly within that we find some really disturbing beliefs that these people are carrying forward and want to implement in a future Trump or other Republican administration. So let's avoid that. Vote, please. Let's see who we're going to raid, and like I said, in like 15-20 minutes or so, I will start the patron-only stream. Check your Patreon feeds for that. You should also get probably an email notification when I post the link for that stream. We're going to cover conspiracy theory stuff that we don't normally cover on the regular stream. So let's see who we're gonna raid.
Vampire Weekend.
All right. Have a good night, everyone. I'll see patrons soon. Everyone else, I will see most likely tomorrow. Maybe not, depending on how I'm feeling, but if not, then I'll definitely see you Tuesday. Alright. See y'all soon. Love you much, blast. Bye.